Good evening and welcome to the October 3rd meeting of the Falmouth Zoning Board of Appeals. We'll be calling the meeting to order and also ask everyone to please silence their cell phones at this time. I'll introduce the board. On your far left, my far right, is James Morse, who is an associate member of the board, followed by Jerry Patamas, who is a full voting member. We have Ken Foreman, who is the vice chairman. My name is TJ Hurry. I'm the chairman of the board. To my left is Ed Van Kuren, who is a full voting member, Bob Dugan, who is the board's clerk, and Mary Berry, who is an associate member. Also with us tonight is Noreen Stockman, who is the zoning administrator, and Ashley DeMello, who graciously donated her time tonight to be our recording secretary. The Zoning Board of Appeals is charged with applying the zoning bylaws for the town and considers requests for special permits, variances, and appeals as provided in the bylaws which have been approved by town meeting and the Attorney General's Office for the Commonwealth. All decisions are made through the public hearing process. The board's goal is to hear testimony from the applicant and from the public, and also to allow full and fair discussion of the project prior to rendering a decision. To begin each hearing, the clerk will read the public announcement of the hearing and then present any pertinent information from the file, such as referrals from town departments and summarizing correspondences to and from the board. The applicant or the applicant's representative will then have 15 minutes to make a presentation, and time may be extended by vote of the board. The board will then ask questions to the applicant, and the public will be invited to comment as well. Public comment should be directed only at the project, and we also ask you to please refrain from making any personal or derogatory statements. But these public comments can include an opinion in favor or in opposition, or it just might simply be a question about the nature of the project. The chair will limit discussion in the interest of time in the event that comments become repetitive. All members of the public wishing to speak should wait to be recognized from the chair and come to the podium to our right here. And we also ask you to please state your name and address for the record. And we also limit public comment to 2 minutes per person. We will then either close or continue the hearing. When the board is satisfied that enough information has been presented by testimony and in the file to make a decision by motion and vote of the board, the hearing will close. In the alternative, we may continue the hearing to a future date and time. After the hearing is closed, no more testimony may be taken. As for any board discussion and decision, the board may then further discuss the project among ourselves and make a motion to deny or approve will be made and voted upon. The motion will include a summary of key findings and conditions. An affirmative vote of 4 members, which is a supermajority, is required for approvals of motions on special permits, variances, and appeals. A split vote, such as a 3-2 vote, is a failure to carry and would result in denial of the project. Under Massachusetts general law, if a special permit is denied, the applicant cannot return to the board for 2 years unless the project is substantially different. So turning to our agenda for tonight, we do have public comment. We have a number of continuations. We have 1 new hearing and open meeting items. So first off, we'll start with public comment, and this public comment is meant for, and I'm still introducing this with our meeting since this is new. This public comment is for anyone out there who has any comments to make regarding something that's not on the agenda. So does anyone out there have anything? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, citizens, friends of Falmouth. My name is Grant Walker. My address is 71 Philadelphia Street. It's in the T-ticket part of Falmouth on the Mara Vista Peninsula. I'm here to speak to you actually on Article 18 of the coming town meeting, which has to do with adoption by the town of the Stretch Energy Code. I believe it is inevitable that there will be some special permit, some variance, or some appeal soon that touches upon innovations in energy efficiency and renewable energy in some way. And so I feel it is very important for all of us to think about this more and more actively. So I am promoting tonight consideration of the Stretch Energy Code. If adopted by the town, it becomes a required part of the building code in the town. The idea is superior energy efficiency. Don't waste energy is the idea. Why would we do it? It makes affordable housing more affordable to live in by virtue of reducing utility costs. It boosts our local economy by virtue of innovation and job expansion. And it makes for environmental sustainability so that we can continue here as a community that people can live in and want to live in. So I ask everyone to take a look at the one-page handout that I distributed, come to town meeting, talk about Article 18, the stretch code. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thank you.
Does anyone else out there have anything else to say, something not related to tonight's agenda? Okay, turning to our continuations, we first have application 35-19, Van Kuren, 33 Pheasant Lane in East Falmouth.
So there's a letter that's been received in the file asking for a continuance from Mr. Van Kuren. So I would make a motion that we grant the continuance.
Second.
I just need a date.
November 7th.
So a motion is to continue this to November 7th, and again, this is application 35-19.
Second.
Okay, motion was made to continue by Bob and second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, up next, we have application 42-19, Hawks Warama, 641 West Falmouth Highway in West Falmouth. And before we begin, Attorney Clower, I do understand that the board's received an opinion from town council, which I don't believe you're privy to yet. I don't think that information's been released yet. So if the board would accept this, it might be appropriate to release town council's opinion to the applicant, have him review it, and we could take up the matter further in our agenda, if that's okay.
I'm fine with that.
Would anyone like to make that
So I'll
motion?
make a motion to release the supplied information to the applicant's counsel.
Second.
Okay, and we'll take up the matter later this evening. So motion was made by Bob and second by Ken. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have application 39-19, 797 Main Street LLC at 797 Main Street in Falmouth.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, member of the board. My name is Hal Chuba. I'm a consulting engineer with offices at 112 State Road in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. And I'm here representing 797 Main Street LLC on this special permit application. If you recall, back in August 1st, we came to this board, we made a full-blown presentation for our project. Just to refresh your memory, this is the old Cumberland Farms site on Main Street. The building's still there. The pumps and the canopy were removed about a few years ago. The owner of the property would like to redevelop the site with a restaurant and 3 apartments on top. This site is located in the Business Redevelopment District. We went through a site plan review with the planning board. And at the last time when we came to the board, we didn't have the approval from the planning board because we didn't have if you recall, there was an issue with the parking on the site, and we were trying to work with the abutters to secure the parking necessary that we need for the site. So since then, we do have the agreement. The agreement was submitted to the planning board. It was also reviewed by town council. It was approved by the planning board. I do have a copy of the planning board approval that I sent to the zoning board. I think you might have a copy in your packet. And also, I do have the copy of the parking layout that was approved. I can give you some copies, and I do have copies of the reciprocal easement agreement if you wish to look at it too.
Give it to the
Oh,
clerk.
if you could give it to Bob, you can, as the clerk, he can stamp it in.
I got 6 copies here. So as you can see, on the site plan that you have with you, according to zoning bylaws for the town of Falmouth, we need 28 parking spaces, and we were able to secure 28 parking spaces. Also, if you recall, the owner of the adjacent properties also has the ownership of the bank property, so after 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and on weekends, there will be additional parking available if those parking are vacant. But basically, we do have the required parking spaces of the 28 parking spaces that we need. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll start with this side. Mary, do you have any questions?
Not right now.
Bob?
Just 2 questions right now. So you're proposing that the dumpster for the property be on the adjacent property?
Correct.
And is that also within the reciprocal agreement?
Yes, it is.
Is there room on this property to place the dumpster on the property?
Yeah, I'm sorry, is there a
Oh,
what?
is there room on this property if you didn't place it on the adjacent? to
On
actually-
our property? No, it'll be tough to pick it up. This is the ideal location because a truck can pull the dumpster back out and leave the site, so.
On the bottom right, near the adjacent building, there's a 12-foot opening. I think right after where the signage is. Coming from Main Street.
Yes,
Why was that 12-foot opening?
that
left
was
there?
requested by the abutter on the west side, to
So-
keep that open.
So my only concern from driving to the property and watching some of the traffic patterns there is that it seems like a lot of the vehicles try to pull in and then cut through that space to cut out on the other side. And where there's already a sidewalk there, I'd like to have somebody look in either closing that in and making it landscaping or making it small enough so vehicles can't go through it.
If this is what, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, we went through site plan review, this was always on the site. Right now, the whole thing is open, so basically, we're closing that to 12 feet, but that was an agreement. If this is a condition that the board would like to place on the project, I don't have the owner here, either one of the properties, but I can say that if this is a condition that we're not, we're not opposed to it.
And my other question is, last time when you were here, we asked about a loading zone on the bylaw that I quoted you, where the
Yes,
the
we
trucks
did
come in
look
and
at
out.
that, the required zone, loading zone is 14 by 45. For this facility, we had a discussion with other members, I had a discussion with the owners also, and to provide the loading zone, we would lose 2 parking spaces. My understanding with the owner that most of the business for this restaurant will be at nighttime. They might serve lunch at that time, he's not sure, but most of the delivery to the site would be coming to the site early in the morning.
So
But
do you know what the largest vehicle would be lengthwise coming in and out?
I would, small vans, that's what I would suspect.
So if this was approved and we conditioned the size of the vehicle, would that be?
Absolutely. Or you can put a condition that will be no loading on Main Street, or do not obstruct the traffic pattern on Main Street. We'll be fine with that.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that if a larger vehicle goes in, they can make the turn radiuses in the back to get out.
Right.
And I don't know what actually that turn radius is, because I just haven't seen it on the plan. My other question was, and this is the first time I've seen the agreement on the easement, but Does the adjacent building that has the, I guess the hot dog restaurant and the bait shop, do they have access to any of that shared parking, or would they be prohibited from that?
No, what we have, with the agreement, we have 19 parking spaces on 797, and then we have additional 9 parking spaces on Cycle Avenue, to the south of, to the south of the building on Cycle Avenue. And that gives us the 28 parking spaces. Now, the other 7 parking spaces that are available south of the building, that could be, that the owner, the property owner owns both property to the east and to the west. So there's no, we can't control that if people from, you know, the bait shop or employees, whatever they want to park there, we have no control over that. But
So when we're figuring out spaces for the shared parking, and again, I haven't looked at the agreement, it might be in there. Are there specific spaces back there? Is there time constraints on which spaces will be for this building, so that if
No,
someone
the
from the
spaces,
adjacent building
it
takes it up?
says you can't have parking overnight or something like that for our spaces.
But is there anything that reserves your spaces for actually you, so that, let's say by chance, someone from the bait shop or the other shop parks in those other spaces, like you just said, he owns that adjacent property? Would that prohibit,
We don't have signage that's saying this is for this or this, you know, but I mean, I don't know if this is the case. If you're required to have signage, we can say, you know,
it might be in the agreement, I just haven't read the agreement. And my other question,
in the agreement, we do have 9 spaces to the back on south, to the back of the building, that's south of on Cycle Avenue. The 5 parking spaces on Cycle Avenue to the east is not in the, I know this came up before, it's not in the agreement. We have no control over, you know, if those spaces available. After 5 or 6 or at night, people might park there. If they're not there, whatever happens, if they, you know, we won't use them. But we do have the 28 parking required, and 28 required parking spaces right now.
and is there, was there anything in the agreement that takes care of the Island Commuter Corporation that has another easement?
I'm not aware of that, I'm not sure. Like I said, this was reviewed by town council, and it was fine, it was approved.
Do you know if town council was provided anything on the Island Commuter Corporation?
I'm not sure, I can't answer that question, you know.
Right, that's all I have.
Thank you.
No questions right now. Just reading this agreement.
Ken?
Same.
Jerry?
No questions.
James?
No questions.
And I don't have any questions either. I think Bob covered a few of my points that I was thinking about.
So the only other question I have, and I don't think the applicant can answer it, I don't know if someone at the town can, but when you take something, if it's a private road or an avenue, and you decide to turn it into parking the entire width of the access, do you need any kind of permit for that? Do you have to abandon the road so it's a driveway, or can you? It seems like in this case, and again, it's, has nothing to do with the applicant, that Cycle Ave and back, whenever that second building was purchased, turned the back avenue, which was access to that other building, into complete parking that covers the entire span. And I just don't know if that was actually something that's allowed, or you have to. Doesn't seem like there was ever a permit or.
Right, that's
So
an
maybe-
issue I don't have an answer
So
for.
maybe engineering or town council might be able to, because I know that in the town records, it is listed as an Ave, a road, but I assume it's private.
Is the Island Corporation using any of that?
That's a separate one. They have an easement off the back, there's a gate. But it looks like where their gate is the parking that's on the south side that these people wouldn't be using. So the back the back left-hand corner is where the access gate is for the Island Commuter lot.
I mean, I don't think we're granting or denying any special provisions that other people may have access. You know, let's say they park there, and they're parking illegally.
Well, my question was, could the original person is changing the avenue into a parking lot, basically? Is there another step that needs to take place to make sure it's legal, so that if we do give a permit, and then they found out you can't have the additional parking over there?
We could condition this to say we're not authorizing anything that's illegal. I mean, it's almost like private property owner rights. It's been public noticed. I mean, you may be right, but it's just, it hasn't come up yet. Their attorney didn't bring it up. Our attorney didn't bring it up.
Well, I don't think that's why, I don't think it was ever brought attention to, I guess. It was just done.
We could always put a condition in that we're not granting any special rights. That way, it's between them and the courts.
I guess before we get into any discussion regarding the project, I should ask if there's anyone out there who has any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project. Seeing none, back to the board.
Do we see anything else that would require this applicant to come back here again? I mean, if we have a reason to continuance, or Bob's argument convinces the others that we should continue, then maybe that would be an answer. But if that's the only thing, the continuance, I mean, the use of this as a parking space, I think we could, hate to say, protect ourselves, protect the town, and say they do what they want on their own property. For parking, that is.
Yeah, I mean, the parking plan was reviewed by the butter attorney, so I would assume that you have the authority to grant parking on your property, otherwise, why would we need the permit from the butters, you know, if this is a public, you know?
So that's my question.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer to it, but originally it wasn't parking, it was a road.
Right,
He striped it,
okay.
changing it from a road to parking. And usually if you change a road or a driveway to parking, you abandon the road, then do the parking.
I
In this
can't
case-
answer
In this case,
if
it
you went.
seems that they're keeping the road separate, even though they're not using it as a road.
Did engineering comment on that? That
No.
might be something.
I asked at the last, so I thought we'd have that tonight, because at the last meeting, that's what I asked about, and we just didn't.
But
I was-
engineering didn't comment on it in their comments to us.
I don't think the question even went to them at this point. I mean, I thought somebody would be coming back tonight saying, this is what the regulation is, this is what's allowed. I know that in other cases, when I've seen things with roads, they've always done an abandonment first.
But hasn't engineering, when they review the plans, if they choose to review the plans, will make a comment, this is a public road, this is a private road? I mean, that's listed.
We might have something in the comments.
That's all I meant, is that,
Did the planning board voice any concern about this Cycle F?
No.
And their discussions of the project?
Neither engineering. Engineering had comments on the technical comments, I believe, parking or some grades, something, you know, which it's in your packet with the dated, and this was a condition from the planning board that we have to address those comments, or from engineering, water department, and fire department, which is fine with it, you know.
Do you know if the planning board asked any question about Cycle Ave?
I don't know, I don't recall, no.
And this easement that you provided us, is that gonna go on record at the Registry of Deeds or Land Court, whatever it might be?
It's, yeah, at the end with the requirement to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds, yes. And also yes, at the Registry of Deeds, yes.
815 is the bank on the left, correct? Is that the bank property, 815?
815 is the bank property, yes.
So, on the building to the right, when you walk the site, that building has parking in back, and that building has dumpsters for their own building.
You mean
Whatever that little brick building
Yeah,
is. So they have dumpsters back there, they've got some utility equipment.
Yeah.
And vehicles. If you park across this back property, which right now is their only access to the rear of their building, they don't have access from the front. Is that building included in the easement access so they can get,
Yeah, they can, well, it's the same owner that owns,
The same owner, but they-
815 owns the,
but they're two different addresses and they're two different ownership designations. So is that other one covered by this?
well, it's covered, yeah, absolutely, so they can drive across in the back. We're giving them access to drive through, if you look at the easement, it's easement area, easement, if you look at the, to the south of the building, to the parking lot, they have easement to come through there.
Okay, so the easement that's written here, just perusing it very quickly, is between
815,
815, which is the bank, and 797, which is this project, but there is no mention of the adjacent building. I'm sure it could be in here, put in here, but there is no mention of it in here, and that back of that building is only accessed by that avenue and back. So I just want to make sure that that building would have somehow access, because that's where their dumpster is. That's where their extra parking is.
oh, that's not their only access. They still have the driveway and the,
They have no access in front. So that building sits about, I don't know, maybe 3 feet from the lot line? They have no,
They-
there's no, the reason Cycle Ave, I think, was on that property, hooked to the building to the right, is because that is the only legal access they have to the back of the building. They can't get a delivery,
they have a driveway opening on Main Street.
no, they have a small opening with 4 parking spaces, but their dumpsters and everything are behind the building.
Do we have a plan of this, what we can see?
There's nothing, they didn't
I'm
put.
lost, so,
So Jerry, I mean, you drive Main Street all the time, so where that hot dog restaurant is in the bait shop.
dogs and hogs.
Yeah, there's a brick building. That brick building is almost the width of their lot. So the front of the building has a couple parking spaces for cars, but the back of the building is where their delivery entrance is, it's where their dumpster is, and it's where some of their equipment is. That property went with Cycle Ave, and my guess is the reason it did is because that's their only legal access to get to the back of their building. I think they could encompass it into this easement agreement. But right now, that building isn't mentioned, and if they went by this easement agreement, that building legally loses access.
We think it legally, we don't want it to legally.
We don't want it to, we want it to be able to have whatever it needs, because it already has dumpsters there.
So why don't we can make that a condition and move on?
So
I
they
mean,
would-
he
they
doesn't
would-
know the answer, we don't know the
Well,
answer.
so my guess is I'm gonna ask to continue to have town council see if they can add it in here, because this is right now, this is the only agreement that they've accepted.
But if they,
I think it's workable, my questions from the last meeting that I thought would have been answered tonight have never appeared in the file and haven't come back to the meeting, except to say, oh, we have an agreement. I don't even know if planning board thought of it, because it wasn't something that's been brought up. So if these buildings are also transferable, so if somebody decided to sell in the future, you'd have a problem.
isn't the entire lot owned by one person?
Yes.
They're two separate
Addresses, but,
entities.
but who owns the land?
They're
The landlord.
LLCs.
What?
They're LLCs.
By the same entity, right? So he
I didn't
control-
look at the managing partner, but they're LLCs.
I don't have the assessors cards here with me, but I believe they're owned by the same entity, 815 LLC. That owns both lots, so if it's 815 Falmouth 815 LLC owns both lots, I believe.
Because we haven't heard from other members whether they
I
want
mean,
to
it's
entertain a
easy, we can,
continuation.
if we can have access to the assessors right now, you can check it out, but I believe they own both properties.
Did you bring your
Do
computer
you,
with you?
do you know what the
No,
address?
you could access the computer records right now.
Do you know what the address is on the other one?
One is
Let me
on
see if it's on-
781, 783 Main Street.
That's the other one?
That's Falmouth 815, owns lot 18.
Okay, there's a letter here from the attorney that, from an attorney, if I may, I think this was a letter in opposition first time we filed with the planning board. We didn't have access in the back. We were gonna close the access because we didn't know we had an agreement for the parking.
Yeah.
And it says here that this office represents 815 Main Street LLC. The owner of the property is located to the east, south, and west of the subject property, 797. So, I'm not 100% certain, but I'm sure that they own all the properties to the east, west, and, so if the agreement is between 815, it covers all the properties.
Yeah, this says,
I just wish I could see it clear.
Well, I think we either condition or try to put a we continue it or try to put a condition in this that would satisfy the board members.
I would like to do as shortest continuation as we can. Just to figure out we had the answers to that, but was there anything else that anyone had questions on?
no, I don't think so.
So Bob, remind me of your concern about the loading dock, because I recall having the same concern.
Yeah, so there's a. Ashley, do you know where the parking one was, 280? Is it 241?
But there's a provision in the bylaws that
Yeah.
you gotta have it.
Okay, so it's 24108C. It says for every building or structure that receives, ships, loads, or distributes materials or merchandise, there shall be provided and maintained on the lot adequate space for standing, loading, and unloading to avoid interference with public ways. All spaces shall be at least 14 feet wide by 45 feet long, with sufficient area to allow vehicles entering and leaving the lot to do so without backing onto a public way.
Did we not have something similar when
We
we
had the
limited the
same.
size of the
yeah,
vehicle?
Yeah, so we had the same issue with the car wash.
Yeah.
And they found out what their largest vehicle was.
That's, yeah,
So we reduced the 45 feet, I think, to 25 feet, so that it would be able to park in back. The other thing is, once they give whatever the largest vehicle is, it's easy to check, because you gotta see if the turn radius can make it in and out of the lot without backing up. Like here, I think it could, as long as it can make that back turn. And the only other issue you'd have there, if it's coming out that side entrance on the south, is that the front parking spaces that the other person is using on the south are very narrow as it comes closer to the street. So in all likelihood, they might have to do a turnaround somehow if somebody's parked in those spaces. And that's again why I question the parking on the avenue, because usually you abandon something first, or make arrangements before you do your parking plan. They striped the parking on that south side for the bank building. I don't think they submitted anything. Then they did the ones in the back. I don't think they submitted anything. It was prior to this applicant. It's no fault of the applicant, but now they're looking to share parking spaces. So if we're basing them on shared spaces, I just want to make sure there's spaces that are able to share.
Right. Well, shared spaces is certainly part of the overlay.
You know, on the southern side, the parking spaces are along the, kind of the roadway, so you have room to pass, but on the back end of Cycle Ave, they take up the entire width and go over it, which is why they must need the easement over the main property to get in and out, because they've basically got rid of their access. But where they put their easement, I don't even know if that easement, I don't know how far it gets back to the other building or not.
Does the town council give us a letter to,
Well, I don't think they considered it.
that's what I'm concerned about.
I don't think anyone considered it, and maybe the planning board did, but I don't have any copies of the
Right.
minutes to see if it was even brought up.
Well, regardless, there's two issues. There's the loading the loading zone issue and.
The loading zone issue.
Cycle.
The
Cycle
the
Ave
little
issue.
issue I had with that little 12-foot space in front, the only reason I brought that up is because I drive there all the time. And people are always trying to cut through there, and they get stuck on one side and have to back out again. So I just think it's more of a safety issue, and if you don't really need it, and there's a sidewalk there anyways, people can walk right on the sidewalk back and forth. You could put a little thing with a bench or,
So I think we're requesting a continuance, if I,
yeah, what would be the closest date? Because I don't want to stretch them out.
17th.
17th.
All right, so then, does anyone else have any
Would you
discussion
be
or-
amenable to a continuance to the 17th? Are you available?
Sure, let me just check my calendar.
Sure.
17, okay.
Let's be clear on what you want,
yes,
Bob.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah, so I want to have the details that is someone allowed to turn the roadway into straight parking?
You want something from the owner?
Yeah. I would want to make sure that the reciprocal easement, if that's allowed, encompasses that brick building to the right so that those businesses have access to the back of their building and their dumpster.
so it has to be private way to begin with.
Because on that property, the deeds aren't merged, they're separate, so Cycle Ave could actually be sold separately.
So it's a private way.
Well, they owned it at one time together, and then they broke it up to two deeds.
But it's still, it's not a public way.
I don't know, it's listed in the town books, but it doesn't give a description, so I would assume it's private.
Is there any
So, no.
reason why you don't want to abandon the road?
Well, it's not theirs, it's the adjacent owner.
I'm not sure what process he went through, the butters, we don't own that, in the back.
Okay, so
We're
that's-
trying to work,
So I guess that's the question, did he go through a proper process to turn it into parking prior to offering it to these people for shared parking spaces? That would also give us time to review this agreement as it stands, and I do see there is a mention here of, I just saw it, of the island.
Top of one of these pages.
It was up the top somewhere.
Page 3 or something.
Top of page 3 is what you're talking about?
Yeah, so it says the easement's granted subject to reservation for the benefit of lot 25 and 26 on land court plan as set forth in the deed from the Island Commuter Corporation to Joseph, I guess, Gietzkowski. My question there is, the Island Queen access is where all that bank parking is on that side of the building. So is this already in violation because they've taken parking spaces in front of where the easement access is for the Island Queen?
Or another way would be to say, does the Island Queen have any objection to it?
Yeah, I mean, the Island
I mean,
Queen, you know,
that'd make it simple.
an easy way here would be have the Island Queen Commuter Corporation agree to this.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know if they've been notified.
There's a land court case listed here, too.
And I'm not sure
Somebody
what
should
that
look at
was
it.
for. I can only guess, but my guess is way back years ago, they used to enter that parking lot from Main Street versus Falmouth Heights Road. And then they kept the rights to it maybe for either a emergency exit, or if they ever changed the plan in the future.
We need to get the town council to look at it.
Yeah.
'Cause they're
You know what
talking about a
question the
land
answer
court
is?
case here.
I'll try. This is beyond my, this is,
It's
have to
beyond your,
refer this to,
I feel bad because you're kind of cut in the middle. It's beyond what your situation is. It's just that no one seems to answer the, and it could be, maybe town council will look at it and say it's an easy fix, and that'd be great.
So do we have 2 or 3 sentences of the questions we're asking?
We
I mean-
want to know if the parking currently on Cycle Ave is allowed. We want to know if the proposed parking on Cycle Ave is allowed. We want to know if the, whatever the address of that brick building is, if they're included in the reciprocal easement agreement, so they have access. And whatever it is would have to be in perpetuity, because my guess is Cycle Ave could be sold.
And did you have a question on loading zone, size of the vehicle?
And the loading in the two, the one I did, the 107.
I'm just looking at the floor plan, there's not an obvious place where you would have a loading dock or anything, right?
we have a door to the back. There's a door in the back to the building. I can go to the, it's 11.
If the maximum size truck is small enough, it might be able to just pull around that corner, back out, and go back the way it came in.
Yeah, there's, yeah, I mean, between the parking on, there's plenty of room in the back.
So it could go like behind the building and then back up and go back out
Right,
again.
right.
So we would just need to know what the largest size vehicle would
I
accommodate
can
that.
find out, I mean, you know.
So those are the concerns, right?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Not for me.
And you are available on the, sorry, what day was that, 17th?
Yes.
Okay, so would anyone like to make that motion?
So I make a motion to continue to October 17th.
Second it?
Okay, motion was made by Bob and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hey, TJ, I think we need a,
Size
Oh,
that.
yeah. I think we also have an extension, if we could get your signature, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
did he give us the? Are there any more plans or anything on that end, just so I can pop the file?
Wait.
back? You can put it back later.
Is this an extra copy? You may want to.
Look at it.
The third. I had to look myself. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Put that on top of, oh, it is, thank you. Okay, up next we have, application 20-19, Miwa.
No, we're going back to, sorry, 641
Oh,
West
oops.
Falmouth.
Sure, so we'll take up application 42-19, again. Attorney Clower?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, my name is Kevin Clower. I'm an attorney with Ahmed Clower Law Firm here in Falmouth, and I represent the applicants, Arthur M. Hawks and Sarah Warma, the owners of 641 West Falmouth Highway. As you know, we just received a memorandum from Town Council, which I've done my best to read and process in the last 35, 40 minutes or so. So what I'd like to do is speak tonight, go over the presentation I had intended, address Town Council's memo as best I can, and then see where the conversation leads us at the end of that.
Sure.
Respectfully, I disagree with some of what Town Council stated in their memorandum. At some point, I think there's probably space for a larger conversation about how those are delivered, because receiving at the night of the hearing makes it very difficult to respond. I think in the past, they have been disseminated upon receipt. I'm not entirely sure if that is a change that's been recent or not, but that is probably a larger conversation to be had elsewhere at other times. To bring us back to this proposal, 641 West Falmouth Highway is a split zone lot located in the heart of West Falmouth, and it contains public use, business 3, and residential B. There is an existing non-conforming two-family house, which is set back from the front yard 14 feet, where 25 is required, and there is likewise a non-conforming garage, which is 5 feet from the side yard setback, where 10 feet is required. The applicant is proposing to remove the existing garage and one of the sheds, and to relocate one of the sheds, and to construct a single-family residence at the rear of the lot. This would result in a total of 3 lots on the site, the existing duplex and the single-family house. This would require a special permit under Section 240-51A5 and also under Section 243C. This doesn't include, as I mentioned, the change to the non-conforming garage. The resulting single-family would be completely conforming as to lot coverage by structures, lot coverage by structures, paving, and parking, and the required setbacks in that area. Following the last hearing, we did meet with Town Council. We reviewed the proposal at hand, the similar precedents in town, as well as relevant case law. A copy of the letter we submitted to Town Council was submitted to this board late last week, early this week. And we likewise revised the site plan, which has been submitted to the board, which addressed, I believe, a question of the low point relative to the septic, and showed the buffer plantings and retaining wall on the southern edge of the lot. The case law was discussed extensively at the last hearing and in my correspondence, as well as Town Council's memorandum. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit, but I'm not going to review the cases in depth. But I think it's important to note that the zoning bylaw does allow for multiple uses on a lot. For instance, business zones allow for multifamily uses. In business 3, it's 6 units per acre. In business redevelopment, it's up to 8 units per acre. In addition, they allow other allowed uses in the same area that's required for the housing density. The density in the overall use is really restrained primarily by lot coverage, by parking requirements, and where a special permit is required by the judgment of this board. Here, the residential B district does allow for the single family as a by right, as would the business 3. With regards to the idea that we're not applying under 243C, I respectfully disagree with Town Council, because we are changing a non-conforming structure. And they said there was no change to the non-conforming structure, but we are changing a non-conforming structure because we're getting rid of the non-conforming garage. So I believe that is applicable. These cases that have been mentioned, the concepts that have been mentioned, have been relied on by this board in a number of decisions, and I want to discuss those. We've mentioned some of them in the past, but again, I think it bears repeating. The Fieldstone condominium is the ideal replication of this project. In that, the board approved 6 units on 1.2 acres in a split zone, public use, business 3, residential B lot. It's approximately 300 feet away from this site. Special permit was issued under Section 240-51A5, and the board calculated the permitted density based on the entire lot. They allowed a triplex and a duplex in the business 3 district, and a single-family house in the residential B. It's identical in almost every aspect except for one. What we're proposing is much less intense. 681 West Falmouth Highway, same split zoning. They calculated the density based on all the districts. They allowed the duplexes in business 3, and they allowed 2 single-family houses in residential B. 270 Main Street, 270 Old Main Road, split zone, public use, business 3, general residence. The board allowed 8 units on 1.558 acres, 3 duplexes in the business 3, and a duplex in the general residence. General residence wouldn't allow for multifamily unless one of those units was affordable. But because this was a split zone lot, they allowed the duplex as part of the overall multifamily to be in the general residence district. 240-51A5 allows for density of up to 6 units per acre. I don't think there's any question in anyone's mind that up to 5 units could be placed entirely within the business 3 district. Instead, we're seeking 3 units, 2 that are there and 1 single-family house in the back. Both the single-family house would be allowed by right and the duplex would be allowed by right. This is allowed by the case law, it's allowed by the Falmouth bylaw, and it's allowed by previous decisions made by this board. It's been done a number of times, many within a brief stone's throw of this site. The end result of this project is that the property will look and be used in substantially the same manner as any number of properties immediately nearby, including but not limited to 597 West Falmouth Highway, 606 West Falmouth Highway, 681 West Falmouth Highway, 6 Westmoreland, 4 Old Dock Road. The bylaw is intended to protect the character of an area and to have appropriate uses. We cannot argue, I don't think you could argue, that this is not in character with the area, or that what we're representing is in any way substantially more detrimental than what exists. I believe this board can and should issue a special permit. I'd be happy to address any questions you might have at this time.
Thank you, Attorney Clower. We'll start with this end. James, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time.
Jerry?
Did this issue come up with the Assistant Town Council? You obviously met with her, was it before you sent your letter or after you met Julie?
After I sent my letter.
Okay, and after she sent her letter, was there any outreach by Town Council to discuss her opinion?
No, this is the first I'm hearing of it tonight.
That's
I wasn't aware anything had been issued until I walked in tonight.
Okay, there was an email that I might have misunderstood. I thought it pertained to something like, we should have some outreach between you and Town Council.
We did meet with Town Council after the last hearing.
No, I meant after this letter.
Yeah, no, I received that tonight.
Do you think, based on your knowledge of the law and her citation, that you could have a meeting of the minds?
Here's the thing, you can give the same case to 4 different attorneys and you'll get 4 different opinions.
Better than 5.
Two people can look at the same thing and come to 2 different conclusions. I don't know if we can come to a meeting of the minds.
I feel awkward that, I hate to vote against Town Council, but by the same token, you made some strong statements. I think we failed in not notifying you, because I agree, we have notified, as far as I've been on the board, all council. For an applicant, this isn't a criminal case or anything like that. So I have a tendency to will vote in favor of this. I would much prefer to have you and Town Council get together and say, we disagree. Because I don't know if there's a meeting of the minds.
I mean,
But that's a delay.
yeah, as of right now, we are apart on our positions. That's clear. I think that this project is allowable if you allow it.
It's got to be legal. I mean, we can allow it, it could still be illegal.
20 days goes by fast.
Anything else, Jerry?
No, thank you. You can quote me on that.
Yeah, well, I have some of the same concerns Jerry mentioned. You know, we have this opinion of Town Council that says it can't be done. And I don't know how we resolve that.
Ed, anything?
I walked the land, and I think it looks like it's a doable, it'll be an improvement to the neighborhood. I say go for it. That's where I'm coming from.
Bob?
So I think it's a good project and less dense, but the Town Council's opinion is very specific. And it says that Section 240-3 doesn't apply to the plan. It preserves the duplex structure, but it alters its current conforming use. It says that the active use on the property must be limited to the portion of the lot within the authorized zone, which it isn't. And the most important thing is it says the board has no authority to issue a use variance to permit this proposal as a less intensive use. So
This is,
I think.
If I can address that, Mr. Dugan, I think town council's memo does not take into account the pre-existing non-conforming garage, which is being altered.
But you're raising it, correct? You're not altering it, you're removing it.
I mean, here's the thing, should we can build a new garage that's 6 feet away, make it less, I mean, here, it seems silly that we should have a non-conforming structure that we could make less non-conforming and all of a sudden be allowed to do this. If we needed to move the house to be within 10 feet of the side yard line so that we're altering a non-conformity but maintaining that doesn't strike me in the spirit of the bylaw. But I think that town council's memo does not take into account the fact that there is a non-conforming structure that's being altered.
So is it possible to revise in any way your plan to negate any of these issues?
I mean, you'd be looking at taking the house and making it non-conforming when it shouldn't need to be. The idea should be that something is not non-conforming.
I think if we just make a finding that there is an existing non-conforming structure that's being removed as part of.
So how do you handle the other two?
Well, I think the fact
The other
is,
two are more problematic for me.
well, I think the fact is that it says no active prohibited use. But what we're looking at is we're looking at a duplex in an area that's entirely allowed by right. And we're looking at a single-family house that's entirely allowed by right. Multifamily is the overall use, but the active use on each of the areas where they could be considered prohibited are uses that are allowed by right. So I can't see how that would be prohibited.
What's the definition of active?
Moving, I don't know.
opposite of inactive.
It's in quotes here.
Well, it's taken from the case. So you
I
couldn't.
understand.
Quoting case law.
I mean, I don't think you could put a tannery in the residential district. I think that would be an active use.
What's an active prohibitive use?
An active prohibited use would be trying to say, if you had a commercial lot with a public, with a residential aspect, and you tried to put a commercial structure with a commercial use in that area. But here, we're taking a residential structure that's allowed by right in that residential district. And that's the active use.
Bob, did you have anything else? Mary, anything?
No.
Didn't want to forget you on the end there.
Thanks.
All right.
Before we close, do we get public comment?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may, could you refresh me as to who's voting this evening? Is it Jerry?
I wrote that
Can
down. It
you-
would be the 4 permanent members.
Okay. Is there a fifth member?
The fifth,
I think
have
Mary
four.
was placed on, I'm not sure. I have
No,
to-
Jerry was absent when you opened this,
no, it wasn't.
so
I
that
do think you
was-
missed the first meeting, Mr.
oh,
Patamas.
excuse
Oh,
me,
if I was then, I can't vote.
September 5th.
I thought I was,
So who was placed, does it say?
what date was that? I don't
So-
know if
September 5th.
I have TJ,
I might have been
Ken,
absent,
Bob,
2 weeks
and
after the
Ed.
operation. You're right. If September 5th, I was absent.
So we only have 4 members voting?
I'm sorry, Noreen, did I
Who's
misspeak about 4?
No, that's what I have. Yeah.
So
The
we
alternate.
have this opinion from town council, but we don't actually have the case law in front of us, do we?
The case has been submitted
The
previously.
ones that were submitted
That were-
before.
yeah.
All right.
Can I have, why can't the alternates vote if they were present?
Well, they can.
I'd prefer to have 5 votes.
Right.
No, I didn't know if something changed when I was under ether.
I'm sure some things changed.
Something was
All right, so, well, first we need to ask if there's any members of the public wishing to, any comment, questions, comments, concerns regarding this? Okay, seeing none.
Who are you gonna appoint?
Usually I flip a coin ahead of time, but I have to do it on the spot.
You have to public notice that.
No.
Yeah.
I'll give this one to Mary, and if the issue comes up again tonight, we'll give the next one to James.
Could I ask if we have an informal discussion, because if
Well, I think,
we're
a-
gonna,
I think a
I think we-
discussion
I mean a
definitely
poll,
warranted.
because
That would be my
if
preference.
they have the votes to proceed, I don't think he wants to go back to town council, but if it looks like it's gonna be a denial, he's probably gonna wanna go back and clarify with town council. If it's
There's
possible.
one of those options I'd really prefer, but yeah.
I'm a non-voting member.
But that would be my request as well, actually, if there could be a discussion and if we can get some idea of where people are.
Sure. I'll start. However well-intentioned the project is, which, my opinion, it's a good project. I'm troubled if we proceed tonight and vote when we have town council saying that we can't. So and I don't know how everyone else feels, but if town council could maybe discuss the matter with you, discuss if that garage was the issue, or how they came to that determination, I'd be more comfortable with that.
So I'm of the same inclination. I like the project. I know it's less intensive. The town council response is just troubling to me, where it states straight out, we do not have the authority. So again, maybe if you could meet with town council and there's some way you could come to a meeting on those 3 items. I don't know if it's possible or not, but, or if there's some way that the plan could be revised to meet what she says it doesn't meet.
Well, I think the issue is, her position was that 243 wasn't applicable, but I think it clearly is, because we have a pre-existing non-conforming structure.
Yeah.
And it just seems so silly that we should have to take this plan, revise it, and make it non-conforming to stay under 243C, when the idea should be that we don't want it to be non-conforming, we want it to be conforming.
Oh, we understand that.
So if there's a chance you
But
can
that's not
meet
the
with
only
her and-
issue.
But I think if you get to the idea that it's a 243C case, then it is the issue.
Because you think
And then
that
you've got
overrides all the other
240-51, and then you've got 240-13.
Yeah, that's where I have trouble with, and I had trouble with this on the other decisions that you cited where there were split zone lots. But for some reason, you guys made a more compelling argument that time. But, you know, is you can treat it as a whole, and then you know, put your uses in the different sites on the split zone lots. That was always troublesome to me.
It's a complex concept, and it takes me, every time I have one of these cases, it takes me a little while to get my head through and around it. But when you look at the overall use of the lot, and you look at what was intended, and you look at the use in the area, and you think about the whole purpose of the zoning bylaw is to ensure that you have some uniformity, and you ensure that you don't buy a house and you have an oil refinery go up next to you all of a sudden, that people have some expectation of what's coming. That's the whole entire purpose of the zoning bylaw. And that's what this is doing. It's staying entirely in line with the districts around it, with the homes around it, with the properties around it, with the uses around it. And I think that town council's position is, certainly an entirely defensible position. I don't think it's entirely correct, though. I think that when you look at this in light of the 243C, which there is a non-conforming structure, and the question then is it substantially more detrimental than what presently exists? The answer is no, it's not. It's not substantially more detrimental.
In any case, could we, since it was recommended in town council's letter, but I think for this case, and we can discuss the broader issue, any correspondence to or from our town council, we get CC'd on. There's nothing confidential. These are open meeting records.
So in the email,
that's-
so when we ask town council for any opinion or question, and they send an email into the office,
We automatically
there is
get
a
it.
confidentiality disclosure on their email automatically.
We
that state-
ignore it. I'm
Well-
sorry, we're violating due process.
Well,
They
no,
have a right to
Jerry,
know.
It's a
Jerry,
different,
we're not violating
No, no,
anything. What
it's
what
actually-
happened
we're
was,
conforming.
it's attorney-client privilege, basically. And taking our vote, strictly interpreting our vote, was only to obtain opinion from town council,
And
and
we
then
could-
disperse to the board.
We
There was,
could ask that that be.
there was nothing in that vote
Then
to
you can
disperse
ask.
it
We
to.
should ask that it not be considered confidential
So
because
once-
this is a public
yeah,
record.
so once the information is submitted to us, confidentiality, and then at our next meeting,
That-
we can vote to release it, but you
Well,
have to
that
do that in
displays
each item.
that displaces the process of people get a right to see what is so confidential. This has to come in front of a public hearing. What is so confidential that the public doesn't get to see it, the opposite side doesn't get? We simply say and we could do it by vote of this.
Okay, so look
None
at,
of us are council, we're
so-
not going council to
Mr.
council.
Chair, if I
so
could
look at it,
interject
so
for a
look at it
second.
this
Yeah,
way.
we're
If,
going a little.
If I could interject for a second, while I care very much about the outcome of this conversation, I don't want to get distracted from
Okay.
the question at hand.
would you prefer a continuation to see
Yes.
what you can do with,
Would I prefer? I mean,
the way it
if-
seems the polling is
Sure.
going?
I think that if the board's not ready to, or ready, willing, or able to approve, then I think a continuation is the only option I have in front of me. But I do think that the board can approve this, and I think they could and should. That said, if you're not going to, I will take a continuance, yes.
So what's our next date?
So it is looking like a continuance.
17th?
So October 17 is a pretty heavy agenda.
We're just trying to resolve one issue, though.
Yeah, I mean, if you think it would be quick,
I mean, in my view, all we need to do is get resolution between what town council is telling us and the interpretation.
There may not be a
Kevin.
resolution.
Well, there may not be,
But
but
at
then,
least you'll know,
Yeah.
I mean,
then at least we can have a clear statement of exactly where the disagreement is, because I'm just confused. Sorry.
so then I'd make a motion to continue to October 17th.
Second it.
Okay, motion to continue made by Bob and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Could we have,
Yeah.
just to extend the discussion, I hope they don't come back and there's a letter he hasn't seen.
Well, we,
continuation
I mean,
to
I don't
sign.
care, and I don't mean this disparagingly against town council. They added that sentence, this was council to council. We asked for an opinion.
Kevin, I just have an extension.
I mean,
Just make sure it's.
I mean, I think we should resolve this. I hate to have him come back and say, oh, I didn't see this letter, and we have to extend it again. We've never done this before.
well,
Maybe we should have town council come and explain why this is council to council.
I think
It's
it's a matter that
legality on
we
the-
should bring up at another, it's not the appropriate time to be discussing that
What
right
about
now.
for this case, though?
Well,
If he
he's,
comes back in a week, 2 weeks, and they haven't resolved it, maybe you could reach out to town council and ask them.
Well, that's what we're trying to do, is resolve this memo with his,
But if it comes back and he hasn't seen it beforehand,
the point is, they now know, Kevin now knows about it, he can go,
This one,
this one, all right, we can resolve
Do you have the
it.
case law that's cited so you can prepare
Yes.
a rebuttal? Okay.
yes.
That's out of
Thank you very
fairness,
much
my
for your time.
concern.
We appreciate it.
Thank you,
and we'll
Attorney
be back
Clara.
in 2 weeks.
okay, up next, we have application 20-19 Miwad. It's 0 and 213 North Falmouth Highway in North Falmouth.
Good evening. Nick Marioni for the, representing the owner. I submitted some paperwork on the denitrification system to Noreen yesterday or the day before, and she has got a estimate from a consultant to review the numbers that we submitted, and until that, it's gonna take a couple of weeks to review that, so we're asking for a continuance for 2 weeks. If that one.
so moved.
All right. And just so everyone knows, Noreen worked very hard to reach out and find a professional to actually review the pro forma. That was a tougher ask than we thought it was gonna
Yeah.
be in terms of tracking someone down, so.
Do we know who it is yet? You found someone?
Yes.
Can you say who?
The last name is Songus.
So that would be the reason for the continuance. That person
And
needs to
so
review the pro
I
forma.
move that we grant a
Second it.
continuance for
October 17th.
October 17th, is that,
October 17th.
Is that time enough?
here in Town Hall, 6:30?
All right, so that motion was made by Ken. Is there a second? Bob?
Yeah, I'll second.
All right, second by Bob. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The evening continuances.
It is.
Thank you.
This is a new one, right?
Thank you.
To your phone.
All right, so that leaves us with a new hearing, application 58-19, DeSangro, 26, 30, 36, and 40, Crooked Meadow Road in Hatchville.
Just take a moment for me.
Oh, sorry about that, Bob.
Okay.
Oh, they're in there if you. Yep. Sure. Thank you.
Thanks. Nothing new in here?
Thank you.
So application number 58-19, being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Mass General Laws, you are hereby notified that John DeSangro of East Falmouth, Mass. has applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a comprehensive permit pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, to construct 6 duplex buildings totaling 12 units, with 3 being affordable. Subject properties are 26, 30, 36, and 40 Crooked Meadow Road, Hatchville, Mass. I think everybody has their folders, right, with the
Yes, we do.
application. There are, there are 2 letters submitted to the file. One letter has comments, one letter is in opposition. The opposition letter, they ask be read into the record. Opposition letter says, "My name is Megan Lumsden. I own property at 39 Crooked Meadow Road, and I am against the proposed 12-unit condominium complex that is suggested to be built across the street." She lists some bullet points. The entrance to the complex is in front of my driveway. This will cause problems as the street's very narrow and visibility is very poor. Complex is very large. The ranch-style duplex doesn't fit the Cape Cod life. 12 units that can potentially house over 80 people on less than 2 acres is excessive. With the potential of 80-plus people living on less than 2 acres of land and no sewer, she has questions of what's happening with the waste. Is any of the excess going to be green? There are similar projects in North Falmouth. She adds a footnote of a Cape Cod Times article of some units that they haven't been able to find purchasers for on affordability. She wants to know if the tenants will be vetted. Worries about light pollution or noise that would affect her property. Has made a comment that she doesn't feel the affordability price is affordable. And then a couple comments that she has heard that this project could decrease the value of her home, or her property taxes could go up, so that's kind of an oxymoron, so. But that's it.
Okay. And for the applicant?
My name is Nick Marioni. I'm here with Mike Borselli. We're representing John DeSangro. And as was stated in the opening, this is 6 units, 6 duplexes, 12 units on approximately 2 acres of land on Crooked Meadow Road. We have 2 entrances. All of our drainage is contained on site. All the units have 3 bedrooms, 1 bath. They're all single-story, full basements with no garages. They all have patios in the back and 2 parking spaces for each, plus I think there's 6 or 8 guest parking spaces on site as well. And as stated, 3 of the 12 units will be affordable. The other 9 will be sold at market rate. Our price point that we're trying to reach is $339,900 for the markets, and currently the affordable units would sell for around $235,000. That's subject to change, of course. So I guess at this point, I'll turn it over to Mike Borselli to explain the engineering and a little more detail about the project, and then we'll come back and answer questions.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, there were a couple referrals and I didn't read them into the record. So just to know, there is, engineering has about 12 pages of comments. From our water department, the proposed project is a 40B on 4 separate lots. Each lot has frontage on Crooked Meadow. There is an existing 8-inch PVC water main on Crooked Meadow installed in 1985. Per the water department standards, each occupied unit shall have a dedicated water service. The proponent shall, when ready, make an application for a water service for each of the units, 12 total. Application is made at DPW office, Gifford Street, and consists of a site plan with location of proposed water service indicated and location of any wastewater septic facilities, with proof that a 10-foot separation is maintained. Each application shall pay the appropriate current service connection fee and meter fee at time of the application. The water department has no other issues or concerns relative to this project. And then the fire department. Dear Board, this corresponds concerns application 5819, the proposed 40B project on Crooked Meadow in East Falmouth. I have reviewed the project plans in the ZBA office, and the fire department has no concerns with the proposed layout of the development nor site access. We also have no issues with the location of the proposed fire hydrant. If you have any further questions, contact Mel Trot.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Michael Borselli from Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant. The engineering report that was just read by Board Member Dugan was fully explained and reviewed with me and Scott Schluter, town engineer, last week. So nothing in the report is unexpected. In fact, much of the issues and concerns that were raised originally by him have been addressed on the plans, so that we're basically left with a few bookkeeping items, one of which is erosion control plan that I have yet to be able to prepare because I just discovered that he thought it was important last week. He has now requested that we show on the plan something that you've become familiar with more recently, site distance triangle schematics to demonstrate adequate site distance. So those two things, other than what issues or concerns you might bring up tonight, are all that really remain, from my point of view, related to engineering. The project itself, for purposes of orientation, if you make reference to the plan on the screen or the reduced copies I provided to you, on the top left side of the plan, you'll see an intersection with Blacksmith Shop Road and Crooked Meadow. So the property is colored in a green color. It's 4 individual lots that contain about 83,000 square feet in total. This results in a density of 6 units per acre, which is within the policy guidelines for 40B developments. Just directly to the left of the site is an open space recreation area. To the right of the site is the power easement, Crooked Meadow Road, which is a 40-foot wide public road with a road pavement width of at least 20 feet, meeting all town standards, is on the frontage of the property. Into the, what I'll call the back, are a couple of developed single-family dwellings. So the property that we're developing is proposed to have a common driveway, and it's highlighted in a gray color on the plan. You'll notice that it has 2 entrances. It loops around so that there's access in front of each of the buildings with parking spaces that you've seen and are very common in and around developments such as this. I make reference to one in North Falmouth on Pine Street that is relatively familiar to people. There's another one on 28A with a similar configuration across from the Silver Lounge. So the concept is to have a common driveway that accesses through the site. It has a width of 22 feet that allows for two-way traffic, vehicular traffic. It's actually designed in accordance with all road standards in the town of Falmouth subdivision standards. Its width, alignment, and grade meet all of the standards as though this were a subdivision road. Adjacent to it are parking spaces that measure 9 foot wide by 18, which is in accordance with the zoning bylaw dimensional requirements at 240-109. The number of spaces required per unit is 2. We provided 2 for each unit, and then we've also provided some guest parking in and around the site in the event that there's more than 2 vehicles at a single unit. Each unit has a sidewalk access to it. The interior of the loop road is where the common septic system will be. There's a landscape plan within your application, that package that was initially designed as just a initial pass at the landscape design. It's likely to be refined, but it shows the intent and the elements that are proposed, such as trees and shrubs. In this wide area, a significant portion of it will be like a recreational grassy field area. All of the buildings have been sited so that there's a minimum setback from the main back face of each building to property lines of 25 feet. Your zoning allows for 10. The closest point of each of the buildings closest to Crooked Meadow, the setback there is over 25 feet. Your minimum setback's 25 feet. Some other site statistics: lot coverage for the site is 16.9%. Zoning allows 20. The overall lot coverage, including paving and parking, is 38.3. You allow 40. So we conform in both instances to those zoning requirements. Part of the initial review, we had an informal review with departments prior to this application, and subsequent to that, the town, through the engineering department, offered a recommendation and suggestion on how to number and designate the units. We've incorporated that designation, which is what the emergency response folks and the assessors department would like, and that being that each building has a building designation. And in this case, they go counterclockwise, with building number 1 being the one to the left closest to Crooked Meadow, around to building number 6. And then each unit within each building has a designation of A or B. So that's the way that the experts in the town want the building designations to be. At the rear of each building, there's a proposed patio, so there'll be some outside space. There's a drainage system that drains the driveway, and it consists of catch basins and leaching pits, all of which are on site. The roadway and the site grading has been designed to meet all of the town of Falmouth standards, again, as though this were a subdivision. The stormwater's been reviewed by the engineering department and determined to be adequate. The roof areas of the units will be drained to gutters, downspouts, and dry wells. And the balance of the site will be landscaping or lawn. So all surface waters have been designed to be contained on the property. The site is served by a common septic system. The septic system's been designed such that it meets all of the standards of Title V, the state sanitary code, and the town of Falmouth local health regulations. This property is not within a coastal pond overlay district. It's not within a zone 2 of a municipal well. And so wastewater is being treated in the expected way that you would have residential wastewater treated. each of the units will have lighting at the door entrances, common residential floor light, and each unit will have a lamp post, residential lamp post, which is common for most residences. There's no plans for any other lighting on the site that may cause issues with night overwash onto private properties. There was a landscape plan submitted to your file that was an initial pass. Based on some of the comments of the engineering department, we expect to refine the landscape plan. One of the comments made by the engineering department was that on the rear of the property and on the power line side of the property, the land on those abutting properties has some clearing done by those, either by the power company or by the residences on the rear, where clearing has occurred right to the common boundary. So there's a motivation on our part, and there's been some discussions with the neighbors to come up with a means to provide buffering that's mutually beneficial to both parties. So we plan to retain as many of the significant mature trees on the lot as we can, and we also plan to provide privacy screening either through some fencing or boundary evergreen planting where appropriate. We, subsequent to those comments from the town engineer, we have surveyed these edges of clearing so that the next set of plans you see will show you those edges of clearing. We have also staked the property line and its perimeter. We've staked the center line of the driveway for your viewing if you want to make an effort to fight through the briars. We've also staked the corners of the buildings too. So we think, based on our experience and anticipated issues and concerns from previous developments, that we've designed this in a way that incorporates all of the typical issues and concerns that you or the other departments might have. There's a little bit of fine-tuning to the plans that we intend to do from previous comments and whatever other comments that might come out of tonight's meeting, and we're prepared to hopefully revise the plans one more time and resubmit. And with that, I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Start on this side. Mary, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have one question. How is the proposed development responsive to our Falmouth housing production plan?
We think it directly meets the need for the three-bedroom units in the town at affordable prices for small family units. There is a need in the housing plan for the three bedrooms.
Yeah, my recollection was that it was specific to a smaller units than that.
Well, there is a need for those as well. There's a need for rental units, there's a need for two-bedroom units.
Two-bedroom
And
units.
the need we're trying to meet with this project is for three-bedroom units. The price difference on the sale of two-bedroom units is significantly different than it is for three-bedroom units. And it works best for us if we can keep them at three-bedroom units. We still think we have a comfortable price point in the low threes for a brand-new house. So it's a need that needs to be met. We are also looking at two bedrooms and some other things, other projects.
And also with the units themselves, and we've brought this up before, is there any consideration to handicap issues that
Yeah,
people might
We
have?
plan to make all of them
Visitable?
visitable. Thank you. Yes, all of them will be visitable. And if a buyer wants handicap accessible ramps or anything, we'll, be happy to work with them for whatever their needs may be.
Anything else, Mary?
I think that's it for now.
All right. Bob?
Do you have any idea what the placement will be on the affordable units?
I think we labeled them on the plan, but Building 1, Unit A, Building 3, Unit A, and Building 6, Unit B.
Just on the floor plans that you have, I think he just forgot to put the bulkheads on them. He could just add them in. I think he just forgot to do them on the plan, on the floor plans. And I know you're gonna do a revised landscape plan. How are they handling trash pickup here? Is this public? Is this
Well,
municipal?
In the letter you were reading from DPW, from the town engineer, it says the town would pick up the trash. We don't believe that's to be true, because they told us something different. So we intend to either get totes for our residents and find a way to camouflage them, or we don't want to do dumpsters. We don't want dumpsters. We're probably going to find a way to put some sort of shed on the end of the building that camouflages totes, so we can pull the totes out and have a private collection on a regular basis.
So would it be a separate structure, or will that change lot coverage at all, or how it is?
Not, we're still working on that, where we can fit it, what it might look like. We've been out looking at some other places that are dealing with the same thing, but
And then how would you handle that? That would go through, like, the condominium fees would include the...
it does. The fees, I think, on page 17 that we've already put together include trash pickup.
I know they've had some concerns with being able to get some of the sales on a project in North Falmouth. They thought they priced them right, but they haven't been able to get enough applicants that actually qualify. Do you foresee any kind of a situation like that happening here?
I don't. The lottery agent we're using on the Brick Kiln project, I spoke with her about that when I saw the article. That's Yarmouth Housing Authority, Mary Wagon. And Mary's comment to me was that the process that was used was focused more on just Falmouth, because they had, one of the two units had to go to a Falmouth resident. The other unit they thought would be an easy sell to a Falmouth resident, so they only focused on Falmouth for their advertising. So when she saw the article, she spoke with Maloney Properties, who was handling the process for the owner, and got the information, posted it in Yarmouth Library, Yarmouth website, Yarmouth Town Hall, and also in Mashpee, where she's chairman of the planning board, and get responses to it right away. So.
Would you expect that they could get Falmouth residents that would qualify?
Oh, yeah, I would think so. I mean, we plan to advertise it everywhere, but there'll be a local preference, so 70% of the units will have to go to Falmouth residents, Falmouth, people who work in Falmouth, or people who have children in the Falmouth schools.
And how are you handling lighting?
Pardon me?
Lighting?
There'll be post lights at the end of the driveways, at the end of the walkways from the front door to the driveway, one post light for each unit. And it'll just be a typical post with a light on it that matches those at the front and rear doors. So there'll be 12 post lights that will serve as street lights for the property.
That's all I have.
I'd just like to...
What are the reason?
I'm sorry, I was just going to address, while we're on that, on the landscape plan, there was a mention that some of our landscape that we put in the front with a berm across the front of the road may encroach on town property, and I'm working with the landscape architect right now to revise the plan to show buffering between our property and the property in the rear, and to protect, do a little more protection for people from the power lines on the power line side, and from the ones on the street, to protect them from this, a little buffering to the street.
On that recreation space to the left, what is that? Is that public, or is that association?
This right here, over
Yeah,
here.
where it says recreation,
It's owned by the Sandpoint Shores Homeowners Association.
so is that for use just for Sandpoint Shores?
That's their property to be used. We're not using it at all.
So you're not within that Sandpoint Shores then association?
We have, again, if you look on our homeowners association budget, we've agreed with this, that this is, they've invited us to join their Sandpoint Shores Homeowners Association. We think it's an asset to us to be able to have that amenity without having to build it ourselves. So we've agreed and put in our budget already for all 12 of our units to become members and pay the monthly fee through their condo fee to us.
And just one other quick question, that lot 137 is the only one that doesn't show an owner. Do you know who owns that one?
That's the one in the corner. That's part of our purchase. It's just gonna be a single-family house lot separate from this.
What do you expect the time frame to start to finish the project?
Well, not knowing when we are able to start, if we get the comp permit soon, say we'd start in the spring, sales will dictate how fast we go, but at this price point, I think we're gonna do well. I think we're gonna sell them pretty quick, and we'll build them as fast as we can sell them. So hopefully next year we'll be finished.
In 1 year, you can do the whole thing?
We certainly are capable of doing the whole thing in 1 year. They just have to sell.
The market's gonna be there.
Yeah.
What are the reserve areas? There's 2 reserve areas in the
Yeah.
back. What are those for?
Those are required under Title V to have reserve areas for your leaching field, should it fail.
Oh, okay.
Usually if it fails, you rebuild it where it is, but you have to show that you have an area where you could put them.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Ken?
Okay, Mike mentioned that it was not in coastal pond overlay, but in the application here on page 4, it's checked off that a portion of the lot is, which is the case.
Probably the guy that filled out the application made a mistake or copied from another one. That would be me.
Then I noticed also on the plan that you show distance between buildings of 12 feet, but the arrows, there's little porches that are, you know, if you really went from corner of the porch to nearest part of the next structure, would it be 12 feet?
Talk about from there to there.
Well, I can't see where you're pointing, but.
Let me zoom in a little bit on what I think you're speaking to. I think you're speaking to, as an example, this 12-foot right
That's
here.
right.
Between
Yeah.
units 2 and 3.
If you measure the distance between the corner of this porch and the corner of this porch and the building, as an example,
Yeah.
it'd probably be it would be less than 12. It'd be,
Right.
I can provide that information.
Yeah, I just think, you know, because isn't that part of the structure?
Yeah,
I
but
mean, you.
yeah, I'm not, it's just, it could have been described better. The minimum separation under the building code's 5 feet, but we're trying to maintain 10 as a minimum. So I can add that to the plan. I can show the closest points, like, for instance, here, porch to porch, here, you know.
It just looks tight in places.
Well, yeah, I can tell you here, you know, from porch to side of building, it's probably, 8 feet, but I can add it to the plan.
Right. And I'm just wondering if there's any slight movement of buildings that could expand those spaces a little bit.
Well, the problem is, one way to do that, for instance, would take building 2 and move it further back on the site, because it diverges as you go back, so you can.
Right.
Yeah.
But the other thing we're trying to do is keep all the faces lined up and parallel so that the parking is equidistant off the travel lane, but, you know.
Right.
The
If you move-
separation distance would probably be on average 10 feet, not that 12.
What if you moved building 3 and 4 closer together?
So this would get tightened up. We could.
Just a little space
Well,
there.
that looks like that's a pretty good distance.
Yeah, we could look at that.
That would at least give you a
I'm
little more.
just thinking
room on the
these
edges.
look pretty close there.
Yeah.
But you also have to realize it's only at the corners and they flare on the back.
Right, but that's where people go into the building, so there's a lot of traffic there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Unless you move the entrance. Then, let's see, another question I had, there's no sidewalk, is that correct?
There's no sidewalk proposed. We don't really feel the need for a sidewalk in this case because the traffic generated is relatively minor, and most people are going, you know, to their space, and then the parking areas have adequate space, like along the edge of the pavement or along the shoulders of the road in this case, so it didn't seem necessary to have a sidewalk.
Is there any public transportation in the area? No, okay. That's, I mean, that's just one of the criteria for where it's good to locate portable. And then and one other comment I had was I thought a 2.5-inch caliper on those shade trees was kind of light.
I didn't design the landscape.
I understand. I'm just giving you my preference. If you're gonna put them in, make them a little bigger. All right, that's it for now for me.
Jerry?
Just follow up on, I think it was Bob's question of, where are you gonna store trash before it gets picked up?
Like, I want to follow up on that because I have some information I might not have shared with Nick. I met with Scott Schluter, and we talked about trash pickup, and in his report, it does actually say that the town intends to pick up the trash.
I meant where they store it on their property, you know, in the front,
Oh.
the back, in the shed.
Oh, well, I would expect that what's typical nowadays, people have those barrels with the wheels, the rolling wheels, and they usually have a recycle one and a regular one, and it'd probably be stored just outside in the back corner of their property, like most people do. Or if they had unfortunately, we don't have garages here,
Right.
it's just the way, you know.
So it wouldn't be another structure, it'd just be the two-wheel totes, whether.
There's no intention right now for another structure.
And on the association bylaws say, I mean, in my experience, few people put the totes in the driveway. You know, they usually keep them around to the side of the house. But
I mean, it
don't know
would
if
be
that's in
reasonable to screen them with some sort of like shadow box fence or something, just a small visual screen, but it wouldn't be a structure.
The other thing, and this just going through, I guess you're gonna, one of the comments from one of the abutters, we're gonna have site triangle, site distance triangle. Someone said there could be over 80 people. I thought you were only looking for 72 people in this.
Well, that letter from the abutter is, in my opinion, a sensationalized letter. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know
Oh, and
where she
I-
got the
I'm just
80.
trying to get to the facts that you already noted that you thought it was in the coastal zone overlay. It's not. Just want to get it out to the public that it's supposed to be 36. I mean 72. 12 times 3 times 2.
Potentially, yes, at the maximum, yes.
Okay, just, and again, this is for the abutters, and maybe, how do you screen tenants?
Well, they're not tenants, they're owners.
Owners,
These are for
owners,
sale.
that's different, okay.
And the affordables are handled through the lottery agent, not
So
us.
these are owners, not tenants, so there's
Correct.
not necessarily any screening of them?
No.
Okay. And again, for the letter that came in, and it's not necessarily with us, what provisions are in the plan with mass housing, whatever, if this project goes belly up? I know you don't intend it to, but if it goes bankrupt,
At what point are you talking about, though?
any time in which the association can't meet its debt,
So like after we've built it and sold all the units, there's a problem?
that would go on to the homeowners association, correct? Before that, before the homeowners.
I'm sure if there was a problem before that, the mechanics of that would be the bank would take over the project and get it finished, so they could get their
So it
units
would be
sold
due
and get their money
process,
back.
there's
Yeah.
nothing in place, there's no
No.
capital reserve plan for things like that. I don't know, someone asked a question, it's come up before,
Yeah,
what happens
I
if
mean,
you don't meet your
that's
financial obligation?
between the owner and his lender to make sure that the property's well enough capitalized and typically, the banks will lend 75% loan to value and make sure that the developer has adequate interest reserves to handle those. And I mean, I'm just speaking from another project we're doing with the same owner, that he has to show.
Will the next plan that comes in be a registered landscape architect plan?
There will be a landscape plan that speaks on all of the issues that we've heard and items that have come up in a neighborhood meeting that we had out there a few weeks ago on a Saturday.
Will it be conceptual, or will it be a landscape architect that you're
It'll be a
saying
landscape architect
that you can
prepared
build to?
plan. Pardon me?
that you're gonna build to?
Yes,
Once we approve it, whether it's 2-inch caliper, 4-inch caliper, that's what's going
that's
in.
correct. Yes.
I think that's it for now. Thank you.
James?
I'm sure there'll be a lot of other questions with everyone in the audience that may bring up, but I do have some questions about your condominium documents that you're contemplating. I get a little concerned with any type with condo living, because you're all in the same boat, so to speak. Are you contemplating keeping in the condo docs the same HOA fees for the affordable units?
We are.
Okay. I see that the budget contemplates $192.50 a month, so you're talking about a budget of $27,720 a year. I'd like to see a more detailed budget. I don't see, I think, adequate reserves, which you're required to have. The reason I ask these questions is not to be difficult, but I don't want to see someone coming in on an affordable unit getting in if the condominium association's not properly assessing, making adequate reserves, and that down the road, what usually happens with condos, there's a $100,000 assessment where an affordable unit owner suddenly loses all their equity because the condo hasn't been very well run. So I'd like to see what the documents are going to say. Are you planning on treating each one of these units as a kind of a sub-condo, or is it going to be one common master scheme, so to speak, common
Meaning
area?
like a condex versus a?
Yes.
No, there'll be a condominium of 12 units.
Okay.
Now, we may start off with a separate 2-unit condo because many permanent lenders now are requiring 50% pre-sale before they'll do it.
Sure.
But in the end, it'll convert to a 12-unit condominium.
I'd just like to see what some of the documents are going to say, just to make sure that.
The documents usually are prepared after we know what all the conditions are, so that we don't have to keep changing the documents. But to speak on your reserve issue, which is a very important issue, I think on that budget, we're showing 3 separate reserves. An operating reserve,
You got replacement reserve, septic reserve, and then $720 a year operating reserves. I
right?
just want to make sure that this is going to be well capitalized, so that obviously not going to be a problem immediately, but 10 years from now, when significant deferred maintenance could come up, I want to make sure that people who are in the affordable units are not going to be burdened with a huge special assessment and they lose all their equity.
When we prepare the budgets, there'll be estimated useful lives for all fixed elements that may need to be replaced. For instance, road replacement, if we think it has a 30-year useful life, we'll estimate what we think it'll cost to replace it in 30 years, and our budget will reflect that, so much a month for 30 years. Same thing with the septic system. We'll determine what the useful life is on that and adjust accordingly. That's how we'll establish that part of the budget.
Thank you.
Anything else, James?
I may have follow-up after public comment.
Sure. So you did mention that Sandpoint Shores Association, they're willing to take on these condo owners as members.
Yes.
So Sandpoint Shores is a homeowners association. Is that correct?
It's a homeowners association, not a condo association.
Right, but do they have assessments as well?
They do. Theirs is $150 a year per unit, per lot or unit per member.
And each unit of the development you're proposing would be paying that?
The 12 units would each pay into our condo association $12.50 a month, which is their $150 a year. We would pay it, however, we agree with the Sandpoint Shores. I think they do an annual thing, but we may do a quarterly with them, whatever we agree to with them.
All right, I understand. My worry was, say these affordable units, they'd essentially be charged double for homeowners fees. I know it's a
believe
homeowners association versus a condo association, but that was my worry. With regard to technical aspects of the project, with regard to lighting, would you be amenable to the lighting on the project be dark sky compliant?
I think it already is, but sure, we'd be, they're just typical homeowner post lights, but I think we can make sure that the fixtures are dark sky, yes. You're talking about the post lights, I assume?
Yeah, the post lights and any lights and,
The rear, too,
on
wouldn't that
on the
be
rear.
patio?
Pardon me?
Any lights on the rear as well, maybe near the patio areas?
I'm sure, yeah, I understand what we're trying to do, not to have them disturb the neighbors. We can make sure that we put them as down lighting on that.
And what about snow removal? Would that be done through a private contractor or the
It's in
town?
our budget, it's ours, the town will not plow.
I think that does it for me for the moment. Does anyone else have any quick follow-up questions before we turn it to public comment?
Where would you put the snow on that, to the right?
Well, we have that whole landscape area in the middle,
Yeah, that's what I meant, to the right of the
Yeah.
septic tank.
yes.
So that would be, okay.
Just two quick questions on following up with TJ. On that homeowners association, is that mandatory or optional?
We're gonna make it
Owners.
mandatory. They have some nice amenities. They have two very nice ponds, they have tennis court, and, we think that that's an asset to our homeowners. And and we've agreed to make it mandatory with them. I've met with the Sandpoint Shores Homeowners Association board, part of the board anyway.
And do you have an updated signed addendum on the purchase and sale? The addendum that we had said that the buyer had to have all their permits by September 30th. Have they signed an extension on that, so you still have
And
control of the site?
The date we're working off now is closing on November 30th. And
But have they signed the extension to permits?
No,
Could you get that signed and submit it? Because without that, your agreement isn't valid. Should be easy enough.
Well,
to-
the agreement's still valid, that condition isn't valid. That we'd have to
Condition-
close without the permits at that point.
So as far as we're looking at it, if there was a chance you didn't get the permits, you would still close on the property?
That's a decision the owner would have to make, is if he felt comfortable enough he was gonna get the permits to close without them. But the agreement is still valid, even though that condition may have expired.
Anything else, Bob?
No, that's it
Mary?
for now.
Yeah, will you be exploring the use of solar panels?
I hadn't considered that, no.
Anything else? All right.
I think it was in some of the comments from the town.
I think it's a pretty standard comment, which is a good idea to be looking for alternative energy sources, but
Thank you.
But you're not planning on it.
we hadn't looked into it at this
Would you
point.
be opposed to it?
If it didn't cost our buyers any money and didn't cost us on the affordable units, we would not be opposed to it, provided the houses are all oriented properly.
Anything else from the board? Okay, we'll turn it over to public comment. Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Sir?
Good evening. My name is Timothy Smith. I reside at 175 Deer Pond Road. I'm one of the abutters to the rear of the proposed property. I just ask that there's one correction. My wife's name is not Caroline. It's Catherine, and she'd kill me if she saw that, so just throwing that out there. And what I wanted to do is I wish to read a letter on behalf of abutters and neighbors regarding the 40B on Crooked Meadow. We'd also respectfully request to submit this letter for the record in the coming week after we're able to obtain additional names and signatures that could not be here tonight. So, Chairman and members of the board, we stand here tonight united as abutters and concerned neighbors opposing the proposed 40B development on Crooked Meadow Road. Developers and their consultants understand how the permitting works, while many abutters do not. My neighbors and I are all going to be impacted by this proposed condominium project of 6 40-by-60 duplexes on about 2 acres of land on Crooked Meadow Road. The costs associated with trying to fight these projects on a legal front are high, and the average resident cannot afford to wage a fight that they will be surely lost on appeal, but here we are. The only power we have is in our voices, in our appeal to this board to review this project as it relates to the density in the area that is primarily made up of single-family homes. This board is our only source of assistance to deny or have the developer reduce the size and scope of the proposed plan. We're hoping to use whatever resources available from the ZBA under the 40B process to deny or negotiate the size of the project. I've read that some town boards in the Commonwealth have been effective in reducing the number of units, increasing the setback from abutters' lot lines to minimize encroachment on those who will be most affected. Not only is this an impact on the abutters, but also to those who live on Crooked Meadow Road, who will have to contend with the development with 2 entrance exits on the road, along with high probability of having 24 additional vehicles as depicted in the available parking spaces in front of each unit, plus visitor parking. The developer made the statement that more than likely these condos will attract buyers from the Boston area who want to enjoy the Cape during the summer. If this is true, there will likely be more guests coming to visit, adding to the congestion. No mention was made of a traffic study, but we're all aware of the very frequent activity of cars coming and going from Pinecrest Beach and Blacksmith Shop Road, including bus, student, employee traffic to and from Falmouth High School, as well as bus traffic to other public schools in town. It is a very busy road, to say the least. Again, this impact is related to the size and scope of what is proposed. According to the developer, there'll be 3 units designated as affordable through the 40B process. As we know, qualifications for obtaining a mortgage based on the income for the affordable units may hinder applications or applicants, as the town is experiencing now with the 40B project in North Falmouth. The mortgage and associated condo fees for those seeking affordable housing make one wonder how this is affordable to begin with, as evidenced by the lack of applications for that housing. Considering the fact that we've seen recent 40Bs in North Falmouth, Little Pond Village, Locust Field Road, Brick Hill Place, and now Crooked Meadow condominiums within this last year alone. Is this project more than what is allowed under the statutory minimum language? No one denies the need for affordable housing, but would this project fall within the safe harbor language? We are not sure what these numbers or percentages represent in Falmouth as they relate to low to moderate income housing. What we have seen lately is pocket housing by developers on non-conforming buildable lots in established neighborhoods, using 40B to build in our backyards. Very few additional affordable homes are being made available in these projects. The biggest gain is for the developer at the expense of the citizens and neighbors that are here tonight objecting to how this is being done. As much as we would breathe a sigh of relief if the developer was unable to move ahead with this project, all we ask is that the board take into consideration the size and the scope of it as it relates to the added density and traffic impact in the area. The development should conform to the already established neighborhood of single-family homes. If the ZBA is not able to deny this project, that through negotiations with neighbors and abutters, the position of the units and the setback should be amenable to all those who are being impacted. It does not seem like a hardship for the developer, since they will still have units to sell, and available housing or affordable units based on the 25% rule will still be available. The stress and frustration of the immediate neighbors and those in other parts of town who have gone through the same thing is unquestionable, and we should not have to feel helpless in the process. What we would say to you is put yourselves in our shoes and ask if you would stand up here for your rights if confronted by a project of this size being constructed behind or across the street from you. In the future, we would urge town officials and board members to work on comprehensive affordable housing plans townwide and not put neighbors and citizens in these difficult positions. We urge you all to review this project and deny issuance of a comprehensive permit. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to present this. As I stated, I will have a printed copy later on for this. And if this project does go forward, then we would obviously want, as neighbors and abutters, to put forward, any conditions or requests or restrictions that, would be applicable to this project. So I thank you very much for letting me have the opportunity to speak to you regarding this proposed project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you wanted to submit that as part of the record tonight, you can certainly do that. If
If I could get it later on in the week, I can do that and get some more
another time's more
signatures and names
appropriate,
for
that's
you.
fine. Just swing by the office and you can submit it.
I will do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question?
Sure, if there's, a couple of board members have questions for you, if you don't mind.
You raised the situation with setbacks. If a project like this continued and we weren't able to change the setbacks, would any fencing or screening alleviate any of your concerns regarding?
Well, one of the things that I heard tonight was that there was 25 feet from the rear of these structures, but it shows that an arrow from what appears to be a bulkhead of 18 feet. So, but then next to the bulkheads are decks, and I would assume that the decks are large in scope. They might be 10 by 10 decks.
Yeah.
So now the setback changes, and if you look, even though, you know. where
So
my
on,
line
on,
is-
on this plan, just so you know, the decks are actually patios, just so you don't get
Well,
confused on that.
regardless, I mean, whatever the size is, the lot line and distance to the back of the buildings are set by where the bulkheads are. So anything that came out from the building, that obviously is gonna be, reducing, the distance from the lot line. And right now, based on, I think something was mentioned, the stakes were put out, and as, and my property is landscaped up to the rear. It's, it was done in 1991 when I moved there. I haven't done anything to landscape in the back of my property except mow. And right now, I have a shed in the back, and right behind my shed, where the stake is right now, it's very close to where I normally would enjoy the back of my yard. And seeing that, and then knowing that there's an 18-foot distance that's mentioned or placed on the engineered plans, I mean, it's pretty close. And I understand what you're saying about fencing and such, and we did have that mentioned at the resident site meeting, and it was mentioned that there'd be a fence there, but there also would be plenty of buffering. But there's a lot of trees that came down during some of the storms in the last couple of years, so there isn't a lot of full growth in the rear of the lots itself.
So at the resident site meeting, what was the fence that was mentioned?
Well, it was mentioned that there'd be a possibility of putting a 6-foot fence around the property, with the exception of on the side facing the power lines. It was asked by one of the neighbors if they could put an 8-foot fence up. And the answer was if the ZBA allowed it, because right now there's maybe zoning, it might be a 6-foot. Obviously,
I'm sorry, I thought that was building code. I didn't mean to.
yeah, regardless, I mean, it was mentioned, but obviously we've been enjoying this privacy for some time, and we'd like to, continue to, maintain, what we
Yeah,
have.
no, I just wanted to find out, because it didn't seem to be on our plan that there was a fence proposed, so.
It was mentioned.
Was there a question for Mr. Smith on this side of the table? I'm not,
No, I think Bob covered most
Okay.
of it. Basically, specific suggestions that they might have heard from us tonight that they picked up on, additional things.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions, comments, concerns?
Hi, my name is Nancy Sinclair. I live at 4 Shade Park Lane.
Nancy, if you could please come to the podium.
It's going to be quick.
It's
All
for
right.
the TV.
It's for the TV, it's for the TV at home.
That's fine.
Yep,
Smile.
smile for the camera.
Oh, I don't know. I get hit with the about today. My eye's still working, thank God. Nancy Sinclair, 4 Shagbark Lane. I thought it was East Falmouth. I don't know where Hatchville came on some of this paper. I like Hatchville, I don't mind. But in any case, they made reference to somebody had cut down near the power lines. I will tell you, that is Eversource. I was standing outside my house, and I got a hand-delivered letter saying that they were going to do this, which they do periodically. So I doubt that any other person has been doing that. It was definitely Eversource, and for that matter, I brought that up at the meeting on September 21st, and I said, you're not leaving much of a buffer there, because it's, first, I believe they cut it down. It looks like there are some maybe new poles there, but they also spray whatever the state allows them to use. So, I also am going to sign his letter. I'm going to write a detailed letter. I have 3 pages of notes. Thank you for enlightening me with some of the things. And I just want to make one other comment. At the beginning of the meeting, you said that comments should not be personal. I take offense to the word sensationalist, referring to the letter that was written by the woman who lives across the street from this development. I would urge every single one of you, individually or as a group, to go and look at this location. It should not be allowed, in my opinion. It is too dense. I said that at the September 21st meeting. I will repeat it over and over and over again. I have a suggestion. Why doesn't he do 6 units and 3 of them can be affordable housing? That's 50%, not the 25% asked of the Affordable Housing Institution, Commission, whatever it is. That's all I have to say. I will sign his letter, and I will also send each one of you a letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any, sir, in the back?
My name is Mike Colgan. I live at 225 Pinecrest Beach Drive. A question on the water area. Isn't this project in the water resource area?
I believe Ken Foreman questioned if it was.
Well, I
or,
asked about coastal pond overlay, but I think they checked no on that.
I thought he said checked yes, and then he said he made a mistake.
That was in coastal pond overlay.
We can verify that.
Yeah,
I
we
think
can
that we
definitely
should
verify
one way or
that.
I think we should, because when I looked at the map, and it's tough to look at those maps, when I looked at it, it looked like it was definitely in the water resource area, so that was my only comment.
The engineers can check that out as well.
Mr. Briselli, we're just gonna get,
I was just gonna respond to that one thing.
sure, if you want, since you're up.
I was gonna say that we'll check the map. If it is in the water resource overlay district, it's a local zoning overlay, not a state mandated overlay like a zone 2 to a well. And it also doesn't have the same level of sensitivity to another zone, not to be confused with Water Resource Protection District, and that one is called a coastal pond overlay district. We are not within a coastal pond overlay district.
Thank you, Mr. Briselli.
Actually, it does, you did check yes on this for water resource protection.
I didn't check anything.
Well, whoever,
All right.
whoever submitted this.
Watch out for the bus.
Does anyone else out there have any other questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Anyone at all? Of course you can. Yep. The hearing will be continued, and while the hearing is open, everyone's entitled to coming by the office, reviewing plans, submitting letters, emailing, whatever it might be.
And the file's always open to the public until the hearings closes, so you can get in an email list if something's submitted or changed, and you can always go in and review it. I'd like to just make one quick comment, just because there was a reference to the sensational comment on the letter. I don't think it was anything in disrespect to the letter writer, but there was some very specific comments in there pertaining to the types of people that the letter writer felt would reside in these units. And that's where you start to step over bounds a bit when you write some of these letters. So that was what it referenced.
To maybe 80 parking spaces.
No, it was different. It was,
I will tell you,
Ms. Sinclair.
My life, I lived in a housing project in East Boston until my mother could scrape together the money to move into a single-family home.
But that's
She
what,
had 6 kids, and she was a single mother. I have no objection to that at all.
and I understand that. I just wanted you to know that's what we were referencing, because I cleaned up the language a lot that was in that part of the letter. And the letter's in the file if anyone wants to read it.
Okay.
But there were some derogatory comments about the type of people that might live in this kind of a complex. And when somebody writes a letter like that, their letter turns on the kind of comments they are. So we try to go through them and take the comments that are valid. And if there's something like that, we try to, overlook it.
Mr. Chairman, just as a simple follow-up to that, my use of the word sensationalization in the letter is exactly what Board Member Dugan is making reference to. If anyone in this audience were to read that letter, I think they'd understand what we were trying to say. I think it was polite of Mr. Dugan not to read that letter verbatim, but anyone that doesn't understand what I meant should read the letter.
Thank you, Mr. Briselli. Just last chance for tonight. Anyone else have any other questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Sir? Sorry, I can't quite see you back there.
William Marston, Locustfield Road. I'm familiar with the 40B, whatever. And one thing is, he made a comment about the road being 40 feet wide there. They probably have, the town probably has 40 feet, but there's maybe 20 feet tied. So there's not a 40-foot wide road in front of it. It's a very small road. And I'm just wondering why, you keep talking about 40B and the 25% and all this. You have 4 small lots there. If you put 4 affordable houses, you get 4 affordables going towards your goal that you're never going to reach, whereas you put 12 and you get 2. So it makes absolutely no sense. You're putting up 9 extra houses for nothing. And what's anybody get out of it? We get a lot more kids in school, you get a lot more tax bills, whatever. But if you put 4 small houses, affordable small houses, you'd get somewhere. And if you did that in all these spots, you get there a lot quicker than 2 at a time with 10 to carry. Does that make sense to anybody besides me?
I think, sir, and not to get into debate, it's up to the proponent to propose to the state what is affordable and what his profit margin. It comes down to dollars and cents. How much, can he build and afford, can he afford to build only 4? Can he build and afford to cut that down from 6 units to 3 units? I think it's a pro forma question. It's not up to us. It's up to him and Mass Housing Authority to work out the cost of this and the
What if
profit.
we went to someone that doesn't have to work on such a high profit level? Like
Profit level set by the state.
Barrows Road?
I'm sorry, I'm getting that.
No, that's, yeah. this-
Well, no, I think a lot of people don't understand the profit level is set by the state. It's not
But, they
exorbitant.
come in, they rape the land completely, ruin the whole neighborhood, and walk away, and you get 2 units out of it. Your house values go down in the area, and everybody's happy. No, everybody else isn't happy. It doesn't make any sense. It's, we've been doing, this went in what, 1967? And you're nowhere near it, and you're still using an excuse to let developers rape the country.
So you could be proactive. You could look for properties in town that are large. You could find a developer to do a higher percentage, which would actually help out the town. But unfortunately, when the developers find these parcels, in most cases, they choose to do the minimum, because they know what they minimally have to meet.
Because they
Do
can
the
make a lot
guidelines.
more that way than the other way. So it's just profit-driven. It's not driven to help the affordables a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I understand your comments and your frustration, and some things that you did bring up, maybe the town needs to take a look at in terms of coming up with an affordable housing plan, and
Well,
I,
they have done that.
Well-
Maybe some criminal investigations, I don't know.
would have been able to help them there.
Just to
briefly,
regards to-
since,
Excuse me?
briefly.
Yeah, it's real quick. Just my question is, if regarding the state that Mr. Thomas brought up, is there any ability to have any relief through the ZBA with this permitting process? And if so, you know, I understand that this application period stays open for a little bit, but are we, you know, are we as citizens, are we gonna be able to help, you know, with our concerns moving forward and see if we can actually get, you know, some relief with this, you know, the size of this project through our determination with sending letters and expressing our concerns? Is the ZBA gonna be, you know, looking at that and with due diligence and help with our concerns?
I can tell you that with every project that comes before us, we do take into consideration the abutters and their concerns, and we try to work with applicants the best we can in terms of coming up with what we feel is a good project for the community. And I think Ken wanted to,
Yeah, well, the
Say
first thing I wanted to say is, you know, I think the zoning board itself has some of the same frustrations. We see a lot of these projects.
Yes.
Our hands are tied to some degree by the state statutes. Is this the best way to create affordable housing? I don't think so. I don't think many of us do. Can we impose some limitations? The answer is, if there are significant local concerns that we can, you know, cite, that it may be possible. Density alone isn't sufficient. That's not a criteria that the Housing Appeals Committee considers valid. So we need to think carefully about what the valid concerns are, and frankly, a careful reading of the statutes and what they say, legal representation can help. That's my advice to the neighborhood. You know, if you really want to get at this, because an outright denial, the track record is really pretty much in favor of the developer. But if we have reasonable limitations, which don't necessarily have to mean a reduction in density, but they might mean better landscaping or screening or some other kinds of improvements in the project, as long as they don't make that project uneconomic from the perspective of the developer, then that can hold up. So it becomes the burden becomes, you know, if we condition this in various ways, becomes the problem of the developer to justify why what we are asking makes the project uneconomic. That's the way the law is written.
Any assistance that you can offer to us, and I'm sure, you know, all the other residents, we, you know.
And we do review everything that's submitted. So if anyone has concerns after this meeting or later on while the project is open and the file is open, regular mail or email, just have your name and address on them. And even if you don't think it's a super important question, send it everywhere. It might have some kind of relevance to the project.
But I think you have to keep in mind, we represent both sides of the equation here. It's just not you. The developer has certain rights that, you know, we have to respect.
Understandable, understandable. We're just, you know, as you know, don't do this every day.
And obviously, the best way to control the outcome on a property like this is to own it.
Who knew?
Right. Well, this is the third or fourth project like this we've seen this year, so I hope people will, frankly, will wake up. You know, I think the point that was made is you could put 3 or 4 affordables on a property like this and get the same result in terms of producing affordable housing.
Right.
Somehow that has to be subsidized.
No disrespect, but we live in a community that has an aging population, which is continuing. So the youth isn't flocking to the town of Falmouth, but that's just the comment that I wanted to also make.
thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
One final chance, any other questions, comments, concerns regarding this project, ma'am?
Hi, My name's Patricia Gadsby. I'm not an abutter, but I am interested in affordable housing questions and how best to achieve them. And I just wondered if I could get some clarification, because I may have misheard. In addition to, obviously, the cost of buying the condominium, you have condominium fees, and then you have a homeowner's fee, which, as I understood, was going to be subsumed into the condominium fees. Is that correct?
That was my understanding.
Yes, that was my understanding too. And the homeowner's fee was going to be 150, was that right?
I didn't write down the exact amount.
192.50.
192.50 was the condominium fee, wasn't it?
That's the homeowners association fee,
That's
also
the-
known as the condo fee.
And it is also the condo fee. What is the differential between the condo fee and the homeowner's fee, which is going to be subsumed into the condominium fee? Because I'm wondering what fraction is left over to absorb, for the condo expenses.
So Sandpoint Shores has an association, and they're allowing this complex to become part of the association. Each unit will be individual, and Sandpoint Shores charges $150 per year to be a member of the association. So the 150 is the portion that goes to Sandpoint Shores. So you have
Out of-
access to the beach, the tennis court, and the other information that they have.
And what is the condo fee?
And I don't think we have a
Let's get that.
breakdown of that.
Get the answer from you.
The condo fee is $192.50 a month. That's what we're projecting now. That's subject to adjustments, of course, based on final plans. Within the condo fee is the homeowners association fee to Sandpoint Shores. So they're paying $192.50 a month. $12.50 of that will go to Sandpoint Shores. Homeowners Association, $180 a month takes care of the condo association. Does that answer your question?
Thank you for clarifying. So one last chance for tonight. Any other questions, comments, concerns, sir? You'll have to come up to the podium if you're going to ask a question.
If this is developed in accordance to local zoning law, how...
Sir, if you could come up to the podium, name and address, and then your question, please.
Matt Churchill, 279 Trotting Park Road. If this was developed in accordance to local zoning law, how many lots would be created? Would it be 4? Were the lots non-conforming to begin with?
I think it showed originally as 4 lots.
So there are 4 conforming lots that could have been developed into 4 individual, single-family dwellings?
Assuming that, yes. Sure, if you want to address anything.
It's one house lot. This-
Right.
Right now, it's just, you could only build, by right, one house on it.
So how many there were 4 lots?
Further
Four lots that were in common ownership at the time that the zoning was changed, which merged and became basically one lot.
So where did I see 4 lots?
Back to the board for the night. Do we have any follow-up questions at all from tonight's discussion? Or?
Just a quick one. They mentioned at the residents' meeting that you had mentioned fencing, but not on the Commonwealth Electric easement side. What was the reason on that side not to put a fence?
No, we didn't say we weren't gonna do any buffering on that side. We're directing our comments that day to the homeowners, trying to get their feedback so that we could incorporate that in our plans. So we're gonna buffer along the back of the property, us from them and them from us, the best we can. And for our residents, for our own residents from the power lines, we'll buffer the other side. We weren't taking input on that
Oh,
because...
no, I understand that, but they said there was specific reference to fencing on all sides except the easement side. Was that?
Yeah,
something-
the question came up, would be willing to, I thought it was in jest. The question, would be willing to fence the project in, and I believe I said no, but we are willing to do some buffering on fencing. But to fence the project in is not, you know.
Was there any consideration to reducing the amount of units or perhaps increasing the amount of affordable units?
You know, we always look at that because we anticipate that question. And for what we're paying for the land and where we're trying to come in at a price point, and we don't believe we can, that this neighborhood will take much more of that for the size of the units and what we're trying to do. We feel that the numbers are appropriate for what we're trying to do there. And that additional affordables, or even going to two-bedroom units or less total units would make it not such a good project for us.
So when you looked at those other options, you said you did look at other options. What was the pricing at that point on the other options?
I'm doing this from memory, but I believe it was $75,000 difference between a two-bedroom and a three-bedroom.
With the same amount of units, or?
Right, I'm talking about the sale price on the market rate, two-bedroom units versus three bedrooms.
And then did you also look at the option that you had mentioned of less units but higher price points, or?
We do, but we look at them in groups of four, of course, because if we're gonna give up if we're gonna give up 2 units, we still have to do 3 affordables, so.
And when you were doing that in groups of 4, do you remember what that difference was?
Oh, it was a total loss at 8 units.
TJ, I think maybe has a question.
Sure. Mary, you got a follow-up question?
I had a question, which was, if I'm right, they're 3-bedroom units with 1 bath?
Yes.
Did you think of other options other than 1 bath? You're talking about families.
Talking about cost. We're trying to hit a price point of $339,900. Garages had to go, certain upgrades have to go at that price.
I guess my kind of question becomes, for families, for 1 bathroom, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, whether that's marketable.
We think so. I mean, I
It says
grew up
1.5
in a...
But you have
baths.
1.5, right?
Do you have
Oh,
in
they're-
1.5?
That's what I have in
Your
front of
plan,
me.
your plans show 1.5.
Are they 1.5? Well, thank
Yeah,
you.
I was thinking of another.
Thank
price.
you for the
1.5 bath, but still, 3-bedroom, 1.5 is still plenty. I know what you're saying, it's 1 shower for potentially 6 people living in the house. And many of us that have been around for a while grew up in 3-bedroom, 1 bath, 1,000 square foot homes, and never knew that there was a problem with it without the half bath and without the second bath.
Well, I appreciate it's a 1.5 bath.
Yeah, sorry.
Without the half, you'd have a problem.
Any other follow-up questions from the board?
Yes, I do have. So if I understand correctly, you're just asking for waivers on the number of units allowed, is that right? And the street trees. Really, and sidewalks, is that,
Yes.
those are the only waivers being
That's the-
requested?
Yes, that's all we're looking for at this time.
So under the water resource, if this is correct, that you are in the Water Resource Protection District, what
We would
would,
need a waiver from that
what would
also.
be required?
A waiver.
But what would be required if you didn't get the waiver?
I'm not sure.
I'm gonna speak from my knowledge of the zoning bylaw. The Water Resource Protection Overlay District is a overlay district that recognizes that less density theoretically would be better in some of these areas, although there's been a lot of study that basically says the overlay districts are really not based on any science. That being said, what they did and what is they effectively doubled lot sizes and increased lot width. They were geared towards by right subdivisions. For instance, if you had a parcel of land that was 50 acres and you wanted to do a subdivision and it was in a water resource overlay district, and it was in a residential A zoning district, without an overlay district, the minimum lot size would be 40,000 square feet. If it's in an overlay district, it's 80,000 square feet. Lot width would increase. It was a way to stretch out or make the lots bigger, which translated into less houses per.
Or reduce the number of homes you could build?
Right.
Could you,
Under a by right.
in such a in a water resource protection district like that, in the example you cite, could you also do a planned residential development, but just have a smaller number of units?
If you were contemplating a planned residential development, you always have to do the traditional by right grid plan, which would be based on the water resource overlay district density, and then your planned residential would have the equal number of lots. It would translate.
Right. So you could cluster them, but the total number of allowable structures would be reduced. What's the benefit of that to the water resource?
If it is truly an overlay district that warrants protection, which I said, I prefaced my statements by, it would reduce the wastewater effluent discharging into the ground. But again, it's a local zoning requirement, so typically there's waivers requested under a 40B development. Contrasting that with coastal pond overlay districts, which you're an advocate of providing an enhanced treatment.
I like all of them.
Right, but if you look at the sensitivity, the coastal pond overlay districts are much more important, and there's often a suggestion that you need some enhanced treatment in a coastal pond overlay district.
Right. I think the concern with the water resource protection was more drinking water supply.
Right, and if
Is
you
that fair
think
to
about
say?
where this is, it's within a stone's throw of the former municipal landfill, and it's not within any Zone 2s, which are close to municipal water supplies. Not within. We're near one, but not within one. Relatively close to one, but not in one. And a lot of it has to do with groundwater flow direction, too, not just.
So this plan, I guess, which was in the, familiar with that one?
Yeah.
That's the one that shows the 4 lots.
Yes.
Is that the allowable subdivision density? Where did that come from?
Those are the lots of record, basically, that exist today. That's like an existing conditions plan, so those 4 lots.
They're grandfathered.
Well, they're not grandfathered, ironically. Those 4 lots are contiguous and in common ownership, so they lost their rights.
They didn't check upon it, okay.
As contrasted against the one single lot, number 137, which happens to have a strip of open space between it, so that isn't part of this. But
Got it.
the 4 in a row, you can only have one house there by right.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Sir?
Someone screwed it there, huh?
Mike Colgan, 225 Pinecrest. My understanding on the water, and I don't want to get in, we can be all night here on this, but just to throw it out, my understanding on the water resource area is that I've got a 2-bedroom house on a 10,000 square foot lot. If I wanted to add a 3rd bedroom, I could not. So when we talk about density, density does become an issue in a water resource area, at least to my understanding. I could be completely wrong here, but I know that if I wanted to add a 3rd bedroom, I cannot because I'm on a 10,000 square foot lot. That's 2 acres there. And if you do the math, it's 3,600 square feet per unit, substantially less than 10,000 square feet.
Thank you.
There's a common misconception. So he used the words nitrogen-sensitive area. So in nitrogen-sensitive areas, I know the hour is getting late, but if we're gonna talk about this, a nitrogen-sensitive area is an area designated in accordance with Title V code standards, and it has a definition. It's either an area that is designated as a nitrogen-sensitive area by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, or it's in an area served by private wells. If you are in a nitrogen-sensitive area, the density is 4 bedrooms per 40,000 square feet. Not an acre, but a builder's acre. 1 bedroom per 10,000 square feet of land area. If it's a nitrogen-sensitive area, water resource overlay districts are not nitrogen-sensitive areas. The only nitrogen-sensitive areas in Falmouth, ironically, are areas served by private wells right now. Coastal pond overlay districts are not even considered nitrogen-sensitive areas by the Commonwealth. You do have some protections in the bylaw for coastal pond overlay districts for by right subdivisions. It's 5, and you can require certain things. We're not in a coastal pond overlay. We're not in a nitrogen-sensitive. So there is no limitation on bedrooms.
So I've run into this in Pinecrest in business, and I think it's because the houses in those areas are in the well district.
I misspoke. Private wells or zone 2s, which are within a certain radius of a municipal well drawdown area. We're not in,
This is outside that.
yes, yes.
Thank you for the clarification. So that leaves us with a continuance, and
What was the date?
November 7th.
we're just looking for a few things: the refined landscape plan, the erosion plan, clarifying the setbacks, the distances to the units, and anything else?
November 7th, you said, right? Not December.
Yeah.
When's the next meeting after November 7th? Mike Borselli can't make the November 7th meeting.
November 21st.
Thanksgiving is late this year.
Oh, it is.
November 21st.
It's not Thanksgiving, is it?
No, it's late this year. It's the,
It's November 21st.
Where's that stand as it relates to Thanksgiving? Is it the week before it? I guess we need to continue.
Because if not, it would have to go beyond that. You probably don't want to go beyond the 21st.
No, we don't want to go beyond the 21st. I think it's important that Mike be here, though, to answer the,
So if the 21st works, then I'll make a motion to continue to the 21st of November.
Second it.
all right, motion to continue made by Bob, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
thank you.
Thank you.
Can you guys pass any plans down?
Yeah,
Do we have any
yeah.
extras
Yeah.
or?
This is actually Ed's book that I
Oh.
stole.
Oh, did you?
I forgot to bring mine, but thank you.
There you go.
Plans here.
We don't need an
Was interested.
So, Noreen, we don't need anything extension in this, do we? 'Cause it's November 21st.
I don't want to sound rude, but we do have other items on our agenda, so if you're having conversation, if you could please bring it outside of the room.
It's just not having time to ever really go through it.
Everyone in the room, if you're having a conversation, please take it outside where we still have items on our agenda. Thank you. And turning back to that agenda, we have the minutes of September 5th and the minutes from September 19th.
No, we have
I'm going to abstain.
Oh,
from
I'm sorry,
September
I'm jumping around.
Not to skip you.
Not to skip you at all, sorry about
5th. Oh,
that.
yeah, we have.
So we've got application 20-19, Hayward, 213 North Falmouth Highway continuation.
Right.
20-19, yes.
No, we had that, that was continued.
Oh,
That
so
was
we did.
continued.
We have the new hearings. We do have the minutes.
Administrative procedures, don't we have?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
My error, sorry.
So do we have the minutes or no? We do have the minutes,
do have
all
the
right.
minutes.
Minutes from September 5th, 2019. Has everyone had a chance to review them, and is there any modifications to be made?
I'm abstaining from the 5th since I wasn't here.
All right, Jerry abstains. Anyone like to make a motion regarding the September 5th minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept the September, September 5th minutes as adjusted for whatever input she had.
Sounds good to me. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob. So the motion to approve was made by Ed, second by Bob. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, with Jerry abstaining. Minutes from September 19th. Has everyone had a chance to review those?
Yes.
Yes.
Anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to accept minutes of September 19th?
Second.
All right, motion to approve was made by Bob, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now we have the Board Administrative Review for determination of an insubstantial change, 123 Brick Hill Road in East Falmouth.
Hi, Nick Marioni again for the applicant. I think you have in front of you a request for an insubstantial change for two reasons for this project. We've received a grant from the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund to encourage us, which we readily accept, the encouragement to make all 20 units of this project affordable. They're rental units. It's a comprehensive permit that was approved in 2017. It's a 20-unit rental project. There were 5 units were affordable. There are 16 two-bedroom units in there and 4 three-bedroom units. We've been encouraged to make all 20 of them affordable at 80% AMI. And the other change we're requesting is in the comprehensive permit, we're approved for Barnstable Housing Authority to be the monitoring agent. We're now requesting to change that to Falmouth Housing Authority to be the monitoring agent. And for that reason, we're asking the board to view this as an insubstantial change because we're not changing the number of units, we're just asking that more of them become affordable and changing the monitoring agent to a local one.
Okay. As far as the request goes, I think that's covered as insubstantial unless anyone else says.
Certainly beneficial.
Certainly beneficial. So it's going to 100% affordable, is that?
All of the units, all 20 units will be affordable at 80% AMI.
At 80%?
Yes.
And then you're switching the housing agent, and that's it?
Yes, and we're switching the monitoring agent
sorry, the
from
monitoring
Barnstable to Falmouth Housing Authority. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Are
Any
there-
questions?
Yeah, I just had a question. Are there any physical changes to the structures?
No. Well, we did agree to make a couple of the units handicap accessible.
Okay.
As part of that grant. So 2 of the units will be handicap
But
accessible.
no,
That's all interior then?
No exterior, interior changes, no changes to the
no
road.
reduction in the quality construction or
Nothing,
anything like
no.
that?
And the increase in the affordable units is basically for the grant?
I'm sorry.
It's basically for the grant, the increase, what was the reasoning for, I think it's great you're making them all affordable, but what was the reasoning behind it? Is it for
Well-
financing, for a grant, for?
We agree with the notion of creating more affordable housing, and one of the reasons for the grant is because the rents are lower than market rate. So to encourage us to, basically, they buying down the rents.
Wait, yeah, so we are now eligible for the grant, it'll buy it down so you can increase.
Yes.
Okay. I think it sounds great.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion to approve made by Bob and second by, I'll give that to Ken. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And
All right.
do we continue with the other part of this? We're asking you also to, we revised the regulatory agreement, which you've acknowledged previously. We made the revisions to the regulatory agreement to reflect these changes to the comprehensive permit, that now all the units are affordable, and we changed the monitoring agent. We need a new acknowledgement to that, so that we can go to Mass Housing and get them to sign the regulatory agreement, so we can record the regulatory agreement before we close on the financing.
All right, so that requires a
That's the
separate
deed
vote from the board?
That requires a vote, I think, to sign the acknowledgement,
I think the town council
and it has to be
will approve that.
notarized.
I think the town council approves that. That's
It-
not
it's-
through the board.
It's
So we
it's
can
an
agree to the
acknowledgement
change.
by the board form that,
Well, we could certainly make a motion that we endorse the concept.
Certainly can.
which is all you're doing. You're not,
Make that motion.
you're not a signatory on the agreement.
Right.
You're just acknowledging which is one you've signed previously.
Right. We're acknowledging the modification has to be made to the
No,
agreement.
you're acknowledging that the regulatory agreement, the deed restriction, and the power of your comp permit and how it relates to it. That's, if you read the acknowledgement, it's a very, one large paragraph that acknowledges that.
Right.
And it needs to be signed by the members of the board that vote on it, and then it needs to be notarized. I take that with the regulatory agreement to Mass Housing, where
So
the
it's a-
director signs
It's a
it.
motion that we modify the comprehensive, approval of the comprehensive plan to
And endorse the
acknowledge
To
the,
acknowledge it.
the increase in the number of affordable units, and
Which changes the
associated-
regulatory agreement.
Well said, Ken. Is there a second to Ken's motion?
Second.
Second to, by Bob. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we have something a little different. It pops up from time to time, but it is an endorsement of the plan for 591 Gifford Street, which is application 79-18. It actually requires our physical signatures on the Mylar plan, if I have that correct, Noreen?
Yes.
Why?
Background?
So that was related to the project where you approved separation of the existing single lot into 2 lots because they're using 2 different financing mechanisms. So this endorsement is merely to allow the plan, and reflects the plan that shows the division into the 2 lots,
Which we approved last week,
which you
or last,
approved.
while ago.
Yes.
So you recommend approval?
Well, you already actually voted it.
Yeah.
You recommend approval of the endorsement?
Oh, this
So-
I
is,
just,
Yeah.
is this a service center?
Yes.
Yeah.
Aha.
Would it be physically easier to just sign, or acknowledge it now and just sign it after the meeting?
Yeah, that's right, it was in
Yeah.
the common
Yeah,
government.
we'll do
Kinda
that then.
sad to see that go.
All right, so we will be endorsing the plan for 591 Gifford Street. Number 4 is the workshop. We have it coming up quickly on October 19th, and we can send potential agenda items to Noreen. And we can all think about what we're bringing
So
for
we-
breakfast.
Right.
I've sent some, I don't know if we are gonna discuss them.
Noreen and I spoke a little bit this week about whether we're gonna get any outside consultants. It's getting late for that.
It is getting late and still waiting to hear back, so
Oh, so you did reach out?
I did.
Who
Haven't,
do we reach out to?
Mark Bobrowski, haven't heard back from him yet, but I did.
I think that's good. Yeah,
Did reach out?
Could do it.
Worst case scenario, I'm sure we could come up with something in terms of maybe, ideally, we were trying to look for something like an update regarding 40Bs.
Well, I thought that we were generally concerned about the issue of enforcement.
That
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my biggest
And-
thing.
Frankly, I'd love to see a discussion about,
I'd
should,
love-
should the town have a separate person responsible for an employee whose responsibility is enforcement, not the building commissioner?
And not responsible to the building.
Should
So
we ask
an-
the building
Correct.
An
commissioner?
individual,
They have fire, they have,
employee separate and apart from the building commissioner's
Yeah, so
office?
right now, the building commissioner really is the town enforcement
Right.
officer.
he is.
And has an assistant, in the best of all worlds, who goes out and actually checks stuff.
Right.
But I've always, from the first minute I stepped on the board, I felt it was conflict.
When I joined, I thought it was funny that the person or the position didn't report to the board. Why were they reporting to
Well,
the?
that seems to be common practice, I think because we're the adjudicator of,
Right.
of any issues that crop up, right?
Right.
So it makes sense that that might be a separate department somewhere.
Good answer
It
to
could
the-
be in planning.
So probably a twofold discussion, one for that, getting a separate position for zoning enforcement, and the other discussion is, until that happens, what is the process where we can bring our own suits and our own enforcement, since we can't appeal the building commissioner?
Can we invite the building commissioner here, because we've had some he/she comments or he comments that, because I'd like to hear his side in front of us when we have some give and take on what about this or that, without necessarily going on an existing
but-
project.
I think that would be good, but I think if you do that, there needs to be other people involved.
Yeah.
Town manager, selectmen,
Right.
Well, we could,
versus just the board and the building.
I would
commissioner.
suggest starting with him and maybe I mean, if we don't get Mr. Bobrowski, I think enforcement, that was always been my number one concern.
Right.
You know, that,
But it's not, I mean, Jerry, just from my perspective, it's not just this building commissioner, it's always been
General.
an issue. I just think it's inherent if you take the guy who works every day with people who are doing construction, there's an inherent conflict.
oh, no,
If you're
okay.
then trying to, enforce
So
zoning.
if this carries on, it's maybe the town manager then or something.
That's my opinion. That's right.
If
I think,
you'd be willing-
I think it's this Board of Selectmen, town manager, kind of, town, needs to pony up.
Is it something that TJ could talk to the town manager on?
Well, maybe it would be worth the town manager coming to a portion of the workshop.
Hey,
Yeah.
what about that?
Why don't we invite the town manager? He doesn't have to stay the whole time, but maybe we can do a certain amount of
I think
subject that
that
we
would
need
not be a
information
bad
from the town
idea.
manager.
If he's,
Specifically discuss enforcement issues. so
he's
you know,
available, that might be nice
Well,
to have
we
him
bring
there.
food, so
We do.
Be nice.
it's an extra incentive. It's food.
Yeah, that would be a very worthwhile
Saturday
discussion.
for him.
Yeah, because then he gets our impression, and then he can always maybe open a dialogue between other departments, and,
On the selectmen?
Right, exactly.
I mean, it's open to the public anyway, so.
So it would be Zabrowski plus him? It'd be, we'd have 40B, we'd have Zabrowski. That's a pretty full discussion.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, Bobrowski will probably do the updates to the,
We'll see if we get him,
if we get him.
if you haven't heard back.
I mean, the other thing I was
Can always follow up.
suggesting, and this is just a list that discussed them by Scott, where are we on INAs? Because keep on getting confused between what the Water Quality Committee would like and what they're doing, and what he requires.
You're talking about on-site, alternative on-site?
Yes. What, you know,
Mhm.
you see, I think they're recommending 10 now instead of 12.
Well, I've always, again, that's a situation where it shouldn't be in, the number should not be in the statute. It should be a criteria, like best practical standard.
I just wanna
That should
know-
be set by the Board of Health from time to time.
Where the Board of Health is, because you and I have discussed this, we're both interested in it.
Right.
But, I mean, if no one else is interested in the discussion of where the Board of Health is on this, I don't see any shakings of
Well, we
fingers.
don't,
Well, I think you're the two
We
main
don't-
proponents of
well, we
that
don't
issue.
usually,
Okay. I take it off the table.
No, I wasn't trying to.
so even when we do require them, Jerry, I think we usually leave it up to the Board of Health to determine what is a acceptable standard, right?
An acceptable system.
Right,
Like one of the
exactly.
one of the petitioners today is having one of their systems reviewed by a third party.
Right.
And, you know.
So we wouldn't say, we wouldn't typically say as part of zoning, if someone came in with a coastal pond overlay district, that really qualified, and we said, we want you to put in an alternative onsite, we wouldn't say that attains a standard of 9 milligrams per liter.
Well, we have a
would say one that meets the criteria of, the Board of Health or.
Well, we do have 12 for lots of 5 or more.
Yeah.
I mean, that is in the standard, good or bad.
I don't know if it's in the zoning, is it in the zoning?
Yeah, it's in zoning regulation. But maybe not, I'll go back and check, but I
Yeah.
thought that's one of the few places.
But yeah, that's, number is a moving target, right? As the
It should be.
technology improves.
The other thing is, and maybe we won't have it that, but we could have it at another agenda item. I guess I still feel strongly that, and as you said, rightfully so, letters from the attorney to us, attorney-client, but if they involve a project that's coming in front of us, it's not a criminal matter or something like that, why shouldn't we automatically allow Noreen to release it to the opponent?
I think
You can, but I
it's as
think-
simple as just making that part of the motion,
At the public meeting, it just has to be at the
at the public meeting,
Well, we
instead of
could have-
just directing.
Yeah, well, we could have
or
a discussion
obtaining
now
town
that
council.
we, in the future, we want these things to be.
Well, I think it's a mistake to make it a blanket, but each
Yeah.
time,
Okay.
each time you do it, if you want it to be available
You just vote the night
to
of.
say,
and then it
we would
allows
like
them to
opinion from town
continue.
council to be shared with, you
Why
know,
wouldn't it be
the
posted?
client's representative. No reason necessarily.
I thought that the memo at the end said it was all right to read it into the record.
As long as we take the vote, yeah.
As long as we, as long as we voted to release it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Like, my point was that it would have been nice if he had saw the letter beforehand.
It would have.
I mean, you know,
That
that
would've.
was one of the reasons for
I think
continuation.
it's all right as long as we give them the opportunity, if we read that into the letter, to give them the opportunity
And
to
then ask them what
respond.
they want to do. They have time to
Absolutely.
respond, extend.
Absolutely.
Just delays things. So I can't think of a reason why we would not want, on a public project, not a, something going to the courts. Everything else is public. Why wouldn't we want that letter to be in the file?
So what happens is when there's a question from the board
Right.
that is a legal question,
Correct.
and I send it to town council, they are replying to that question
Correct.
as your private counsel. So it's privileged. That being said, they then say, okay, when the meeting comes, you can vote to share it or not. The purpose, part of the purpose behind not sharing it is
This-
that the presenting attorney could take what town council provides to you and come and sell something different. And then the town council is behind the 8 ball because someone has come in to dispute what they've said, but town council now does not have an opportunity to participate in the.
That's valid. That
So-
I understand. Okay,
Right,
I can
so
appreciate that.
the point is that they're giving their best advice to you to answer your questions, and that then the choice is for the board to decide to share, as opposed to something that the public submits that is part of the public record.
I think this is part of, I agree with you saying, I still think it's part of the public record.
Well, it's
Well, it is,
actually,
once
it's
it's-
actually not until you
No,
vote
it's
it.
not until we vote.
Voted, okay.
Right.
Once you vote, it is, because it's a public
Right.
meeting.
Okay.
I
I mean, I can see that. I had blinders on as far as having him sandbag, not that they would, you know.
So
It
on a-
just delays the process. Okay, I
On
understand.
a separate subject, when the board has time, I'd like to get some feedback. So the articles have come out for the town meeting. We've had some issues with the business redevelopment when we were dealing with stories and heights. And the planning board is trying to fix that. So they are now proposing adding the words 2.5 stories, not to exceed 35 feet. But they have added another sentence, and the next sentence says, "The upper half-story may be expanded by special permit of the planning board in conjunction with established design guidelines for large-scale developments in order to clarify the maximum number of stories as noted elsewhere in the bylaw." So I understand the 2.5 stories, I know that's the issue we
Yeah, that
had.
was Ken had really, yeah.
I don't know what this other sentence opens people up to, or if this passed, would we then have any control if we didn't want something to go over 2.5 stories?
Well, probably not.
I actually,
Curious language.
under future agenda items, thought that at some point, we should probably look at all of the zoning articles for town meeting. They have 5, 6, and 7.
And maybe even submit
And then
comments.
also, there are some planning ones that affect the charter. And I thought it might behoove us to also take a look at those, which is 24, 27, and 29.
So, is that one that you just, have these all been voted by the planning board?
No, so the process is
The
started.
three, the 5, 6, and 7 have been voted.
Tom sent them around, right?
Yeah,
No,
you'll
they had
probably
a
get them on the town
meeting,
meeting list.
they-
You get 'em
Yes,
on the meeting
I'm
list.
sorry.
On Tuesday, at the planning board meeting, they had presentations, and they voted on those 3.
What were the other three numbers after 5, 6, and 7?
The other ones I have are 24, 27, and 29, and those are the charter changes.
And what I can do is I can always forward the email to Noreen that gives the changes that they submitted,
That Tom
and then
had,
you can
yeah.
disperse them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mary, I think that's a great idea, putting it on a
Yeah.
future date so we can review them and
There
discuss.
even is a capital item that talks about, it talks about a new way to do the zoning.
Zone-based or something?
Oh,
Form-based.
Form-based.
Yes,
Mhm.
it's form-based.
I get confused. I understand what they're doing, but yeah, we could,
That's Jim, right?
That's Jim.
And I assume we had not been asked beforehand about
No.
these.
we were briefed on that. I don't know
Well,
how
Jim's been
well.
pushing it for a while.
Yeah.
Form-based. I knew they were gonna do the 2.5 stories. I was a little surprised with the special permit edition without.
Yeah.
Well, the 2.5 stories is a good clarification.
It is, but
If they
knowing
just
that,
would leave it at that.
knowing that we had the same issue, if they were gonna put a special permitted addendum in, I thought they would at least ask.
I think they shouldn't have done that.
No.
Well, we could speak up, those of us that are town meeting members can speak up to add,
They have to,
delete
because
something.
what is the definition of large-scale development? I don't even, that's even listed in our bylaws at all.
Well, that's a
I
good point.
might even suggest that it might be possible that the ZBA might want to make a comment at town meeting.
Yeah.
Depending on what our
On
discussion
rare occasion, we
is.
do.
Could we let Tom know, maybe he
That's
could,
only a month away, right?
of our concerns about that, or do you think they've vetted that?
But they've
thoroughly?
already voted it, but we should
Okay,
maybe
so
make
we-
some
So
public.
we'll make a,
All right. So on our next meeting, I guess we can add discussion of those.
good point.
I mean, if you allow it, then every time someone comes in, they're gonna argue for it. and you're
Well, it's kinda
gonna-
interesting. I went
and
to
every
the-
time they argue for it, you're gonna cave.
Yeah.
And so basically, why not just say, okay, it's 3 stories?
Well, I went to the affordable housing meeting they had the other
Oh.
night on affordable housing in town and what they could do, and it was interesting, because Eric Turkington spoke at the meeting, and he was discussing when the town was thinking of business redevelopment way back when. The real thoughts of theirs, if we make these exceptions, units will be built which would automatically be affordable. And what's turned out is that all the projects that have been on those properties have not been affordable, but they've allowed them to put extra units in.
That's not true. 704 Main Street is 100%
Except,
affordable.
that's the only one, but all the other developers that he mentioned went in, except for 704.
704 was a 40B.
Have
right?
added, because that was a 40B, have added the units, but in most cases, there's nothing that's affordable, and they thought that it would really push the affordability of the
Well,
units.
there wasn't a requirement for affordability as defined as by 80% of the, 30% of 80% of the median. But they're smaller apartments, they're not super expensive.
You have to see
Are
what they're
they?
renting them, yeah.
Are you
But they're
talking
not on
about
the
the
list.
mixed use? Where they're
Yeah, there's
Yeah, the
usually-
mixed use, the idea was to encourage mixed use and people having housing in the downtown.
And the only thing I would mention is, I understand that. If we have an aging population, it seems to me that if it's on top of some kind of commercial building, there aren't a whole lot of people who can make it up the stairs,
Well, it
or
wasn't
unless
necessarily-
they put elevators in. You know what I'm saying?
But I don't think
So it limits
I
given
think,
our housing needs in Falmouth,
the
their
intention
affordability.
of that overlay district was not strictly to create affordable housing. It was to foster a more pedestrian-friendly streetscape in East Main Street, where there were curb cuts every, 200 feet or 100, it was
Every 50 feet.
every 50 feet.
Yeah.
And there were 18 gas stations, and it was to make it more like the rest of down, the more like down by the green, where you had, and foster commercial, commerce and stuff. It really wasn't about affordable housing. It was about shared parking.
I think maybe the impression that the public might have gotten is that if you're having
don't
those
think so.
apartments,
I thi-
they probably would have been affordable, because like you said, due to the size.
But the argument was, this way, people can have their retail on the first floor and make some extra income from having residential on the second floor.
704 is considered successful, isn't it?
Yes.
Because they're
Very
capped.
successful.
You've got capped rent, so because there's such a lack of housing, even though you're building smaller units, they're getting prime price tags. Because there's so many people looking, they're picking the cream of the crop that'll pay whatever they can pay. It's still good to have housing and have residences, it's just
Yeah, I just, you know,
where
you
they're
can't,
searching for these options
you need all
for
kinds of housing.
affordability in general. You know, we had the original apartment bylaw that didn't work, so they took the affordability component out.
Right.
But, you know, along these lines, the Massachusetts as a state is looking for 3-bedroom units for families.
For that?
Our housing production needs document is talking about 2 bedrooms
Yeah.
and elderly. So you have a disconnect because if they're going to mass housing, they're all saying 3 because that's what they want. And yet we're looking for smaller units. Pretty much it.
And that's in our housing production plan?
Yep.
Right, well, the question is, are we trying to house the workforce or families or what is, you know, I think, or the elderly?
It's,
There's
according
a-
to our plan, our emphasis is on local people living here and on elderly. That's in the plan.
Right.
And that's not what the developers are proposing.
No, and I can somewhat understand it because Massachusetts is telling them they want 3-bedroom
Well, it's maximizing.
for
the income.
families. But it's also for families. They're specifically looking for families.
Yeah, well, all these condo type things, they're for summer housing, right? The market rates at least they're trying to fill them up with.
Well, you've had the issue, like the.
Helmut
it's been-
Circle.
Been cited in the paper with the North Falmouth complex, which I didn't expect at all. They wouldn't get somebody to qualify for the affordable units. And they haven't, so they're gonna have to restart the process all over again, unless a developer could choose to lower the purchase price and then adjust the markets, but the developers just don't want to do that. So I'm worried that in the future, you may get some of these projects where the intention is that these units will sell, but we phase them in, and you will get projects now that if they don't have qualifications for, they're gonna sit because they can't build the rest of the units.
Mm-hmm.
And in most cases, the income guidelines they're just going over them a little bit because it's a different basis. So it may be a formula that developers really, I don't think the developers are really looking at that issue. They're assuming that if a local agent says this is what it'll sell for, it will. But if you have to qualify under certain criteria and nobody can qualify, you can't sell the units. You can't move on. And that's a big disappointment, I think, with North Falmouth. It looks beautiful. They just can't get the people that qualify to purchase them.
Have they sold any of the market units in there?
I don't know, but I didn't look at that, but I just know that well, they couldn't have sold them any. I mean, the affordable units, they have no one that qualifies for them.
But they're still building them.
And it's 230, and I think it's 239.
No one that qualifies who can pay?
Yeah, because I think are they 239?
Something like that.
So they're
yeah.
around 239
So if they were 210, would they sell?
if they were two.
Aren't they condos?
Two?
Yeah, if they
Aren't they
were
also
40,000
condos?
less.
Huh?
They're condos, yeah.
I think
Which makes the issue, because
one
you've got
of
the fees.
One of
they're
the,
adding in.
one of the hesitation by some people who would be eligible is that that's an unknown cost, which can go up,
So they
just as
cap.
James was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were saying, James, if you get qualified for a condo now, even the banks, they're saying this is what you qualify for a purchase,
Yeah.
but
Add an HOA fee of $400 a month, that's the
This is
equivalent
your-
of $50,000 to $75,000
this
for
is your
its purchase
cap
price.
on the HOA fee. If it goes over the cap, they can't get in. And a lot of the complexes, like you said, the market complexes that don't have affordable units in them, they have all gotten issues over the last couple of years with massive assessments for upgrades.
And it goes back, it is not, usually it's smaller units that are not properly managed by a professional company, or they're just going along on a shoestring budget, and
And that's
it
something
gets
we don't
deferred.
have a lot of guidelines with, because we can't say you have to do this, you have to do that, but something they have to think about, because it's gonna affect these projects being built.
Mm-hmm.
I ran a condo association several years ago, and there was 12 units, 3 buildings, and we had a vote. Once the developer was gone, he came in and put those units together in no time, and it was nice and clean. Before he could paint dried in some of the units, he was ready to form the association, or get out of it himself.
Yeah.
So and then we had a vote, and whether to keep the condo fee low and make one-time assessments for major expenditures, like we have to repaint the buildings, or put a new roof on in 20 years, and things like that, and to make them a one-time charge. And we voted, and it was unanimous. No, it wasn't unanimous. It was more than 50% went for the assessments. And people, there was no 40Bs or any of that stuff back then. But the people that bought the units, and all of a sudden they got slapped with a big expenditure occasionally, they were getting uptight. But, and I understand it, it was done for the wrong reason, probably, well, in some people's mind, it was done that way. I don't know how these condo associations are doing it today, but how do you set up the funds? You do have
You're
a
legally
capital-
required to maintain what's
Yeah.
called adequate reserves. The courts have never defined that, but what everyone in the practice is saying, 10% per year should be going into a reserve fund.
Is that what they're saying?
Yeah.
Replacement.
Because otherwise, it
Yes.
makes sense. You could live in it for 18 years and sell it, right? Then in the 20th year,
Here
they
comes
get
special
slapped with a
assessments.
big assessment
Well,
for
and-
someone who's only lived there 2 years.
And then you also have to watch nowadays on how the condo docs are written up, because if the condo docs will allow rentals of owner units, and your percentage of actual owner occupied to rental ratio is off, they are not financeable except if it's in-house financing. I don't even know how that would affect a
Absolutely.
affordable unit.
It's why I've kind of,
It's becoming very common now, and there's a worksheet they fill out, but if that ratio is off,
I think it's why we need to start to insist to see
we
what are your
have to see the
proposed condo
docs, we have to make,
documents.
are these rentable, even the market units? Because if they are, and they rent half, you've got now a problem on anyone financing.
Do we?
I don't know.
I thought at one time that we asked the developers, especially for affordable, are they gonna have the association fee for the affordable units the same or reduced? And a lot of them say they wanna keep them the same so that
They should be
people
the
don't.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because they
so
don't
the,
wanna feel
that's, so the,
discriminated
yeah, so
against.
it's not, so the idea behind it is, if your condo fee is 200 and you take the affordable units and say theirs is 100.
Yeah.
When it comes to association meetings, the people paying the larger fee don't feel the other people
Okay,
should
so
have
that's
a vote.
it.
It's more of a,
Beyond us,
But-
okay.
And it should be based on percentage of ownership.
yeah, it should be
That's-
But
ownership and not
actually, and it's different in some of these cases, but there are many condo associations where there's a difference in your condo fee based on the size of the unit
Yes.
and other amenities that are there. So it's not necessarily unheard of to have different condo fees for
Yeah.
different units,
Yes.
and
Sure.
it's acceptable.
But it needs to be spelled out fairly and clearly in the master
Definitely,
deed.
it's almost always a percentage
Yes.
figure that's.
And the
put
issue
in.
is, we usually don't get to see the actual condo docs, because they go directly to council, and if council's looking at it, if he's looking at the legalities, they may not be looking at them for these other issues that could affect the feasibility of the complex.
It just gets back to my concern about, I don't know if we can necessarily condition anything about, but it's a concern that down the road, 10 or 15 years from now, if it's not well capitalized and well run, someone who purchases an affordable unit for, say, $150,000 or $200,000, and there's, a major maintenance issue and a special assessment comes down for $150,000, you've robbed them of every penny they have on their equity. I don't think it's basic fairness of protecting people in affordable units. There are things I think we should be doing to make sure that doesn't happen by
So
conditioning.
how would you condition it?
That's, the tricky part. I mean, you make a condition of the permit that they have to comply with the, I can pull up the specific statute, maintaining adequate reserves and budgeting adequate reserves, or making sure that that's included in the master deed. That, they will maintain, 10% of their budget each year has to be maintained. They have to maintain, putting a dollar value on or not, or I don't know if we want to maybe reach out to other
And then you'd have to
boards
have them
if
submit
they've
it.
I
had
have to
this
excuse
issue.
myself. Nature's calling,
Okay,
and I won't come back.
all right.
We haven't adjourned yet, have we?
No, we haven't.
And then-
Well, turning back to the open meeting items, zoning recodification committee, ongoing?
Ongoing.
All right, future agenda items, we already covered that, and our next hearing will be October 17th, 6:30 here at Town Hall, meeting adjourned.
That's an interesting point.